7th, 2017. I would like to remind members of the public that the Commission does not tolerate any disruption or outbursts of any kind. Please silence your mobile devices that may sound off during these proceedings. And when speaking before the Commission, if you care to, do state your name for the record. I'd like to take roll at this time. Commission President Hillis.
Here.
Commissioner Fong.
Here.
Commissioner Koppel.
Here.
And Commissioner Moore.
Here.
We do expect Commissioners Richards, Johnson, and Melgar to arrive shortly. Commissioners, first on your agenda is consideration of items proposed for continuance. Items 1A and B for case numbers 2013.0975 E and X and SHD at 888 Tennessee Street. Large project authorization and adoption of shadow findings are proposed for continuance to October 19th, 2017. Item 2, case number 2015-018225 DRP at 171 Judson Avenue. Discretionary review is proposed for continuance to November 16th, 2017. Item 3, case number 2017-004110 CUA at 2867 through 2899 San Bruno Avenue. Conditional use authorization is proposed for indefinite continuance. Commissioners, further under your regular calendar, we have received requests for continuance of items 11 and 12. For case numbers 2015-005862 E and X at 975 Bryant Street, a large project authorization is proposed for continuance to September 14th, just for 1 week. And item 12 for case number 2014-002181 CUA at 2670 Gary Boulevard, a conditional use authorization is proposed for continuance to September 28th, 2017. I have no speaker cards.
Thank you, Jonas. Any public comment on the items being proposed for continuance? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioner Moore.
Move to continue items 1 through 3 and added items 11 and 12 to the dates proposed.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion, then, to continue all matters as proposed, Commissioner Fong.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us under your, on Commission matters. We have no consent calendar today. Item 4, consideration of adoption draft minutes for August 24th, 2017.
Is there any public comment on the draft minutes? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioner Moore.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to adopt the minutes from August 24th, 2017, Commissioner Fong.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 7-0. Commissioners, that'll place us on item 5, Commission comments and questions.
None today, Jonas.
Wow. Moving right along. Department matters. Item 6, Director's announcements.
Thanks. Good afternoon,
Hey.
Commissioners. I would like to request to close the meeting today in memory of Bob Hamaguchi. Bob was the president of the Japantown Task Force, and Bob passed away on Sunday. And I just want to say, as in the early stages of the Japantown plan, when I first got here, Bob was one of the first people I met with when we were starting that process. He was a very passionate advocate for his neighborhood, and he was also an incredibly gracious person, very energetic, a person who was grateful for the collaboration, for the funding, for the work of the department, the work he did in the community, and one of those people who really kind of set the standard, I think, for the Japantown community in an incredibly positive light. So I would ask that we adjourn the meeting in his honor today. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I agree. I mean, I've worked with Bob over the years, too, and great guy, but a passionate advocate for Japantown, so we will certainly do that.
Thank you.
Commissioners, item 7, review of past events at the Board of Supervisors, Board of Appeals, There was no Historic Preservation Commission hearing, or excuse me, there was. I take it back. I apologize.
Diego Sanchez with department staff. Ordinarily, Aaron Starr would give you the board report, but he is off on a much-deserved vacation, so I'll be filling in today. This week, there was no land use committee hearing because of the Labor Day holiday, but the board did meet on Tuesday. The following 3 items passed on second read. The first was child care facilities. The second was the inclusionary affordable housing fee and dwelling unit mix requirements. And the third was the medical cannabis dispensaries in supervisorial District 11. The board also considered 3 appeals. The first was an appeal of the final environmental impact report certification for the 1 Oak Street project. As you recall, the 1 Oak Street project consists of the demolition of all existing on-site structures and the construction of a new 40-story building with 310 residential units, 4,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space, and a subsurface parking lot with 136 spaces for residents. Commissioners, you heard this item on June 15th of this year. The board granted a 1-week continuance of the appeal to September 12th. Associated amendments to the general plan, the planning code, and the zoning map were also continued to September 12th. The second appeal was an appeal of the final environmental impact report certification for the Alameda Creek Recapture Project, or the ACRP. The ACRP is a water supply project located in the Sunol Valley on lands within the SFPUC's Alameda watershed. The SFPUC is required to make releases from the Calaveras Dam and to bypass creek flow around the Alameda Creek Diversion Dam. The releases and the bypasses are designed to improve stream flow in Alameda Creek and ensure suitable flow conditions for the threatened California Central Coast steelhead. The SFPUC proposes the ACRP project to recapture some of the water that is required to release and bypass in order to also use this water in its regional water system. The board voted unanimously to reverse the final environmental impact report certification. The board directed that findings be based on significant new information provided by the National Marine Fisheries Service, that additional environmental analysis is required on the operational impacts of the project on steelhead in the lower watershed as a result of project-induced effects on stream flow in Alameda Creek, and to require the department to enlist a third-party review of the groundwater and surface water model to determine if the current model adequately and accurately analyzes the fisheries issues as required by CEQA. The final appeal was the appeal of the determination of exemption from environmental review, as well as the appeal of conditional use authorization on the 2505 Noriega project. This project is a change of use to a medical cannabis dispensary doing business as the Apothecarium. Commissioners, you heard this item on July 13th and voted 5-1 to grant conditional use authorization. The board continued the hearing of these items to October 3rd. The board also approved a motion to unanimously adopt findings related to the conditional use authorization of the proposed project at 824 Hyde Street. The project would have constructed a 6-story over basement, 33-room tourist hotel. The site was previously occupied by an apartment building that was destroyed by a fire. Commissioners, you heard this conditional use authorization request on June 1st and voted 4-3 to grant that authorization. At its July 25th meeting, the board heard an appeal of the CU. The board voted unanimously to disapprove the CU authorization. On Tuesday, as mentioned, the board passed a motion adopting findings in support of the disapproval of your decision granting CU authorization. And finally, there were some introductions on Tuesday. The first were amendments to the general plan to accommodate the Pier 70 mixed-use district project. This ordinance proposes to amend the general plan to revise maps 4 and 5 of the urban design element to refer to the Pier 70 mixed-use project special use district. There was Board File 170941, which is the Transit Center Special Sign District. This ordinance proposes to make the existing interim controls on signs in the Transit Center District Plan area permanent. This item is scheduled to be before you and your consideration on September 14th. There was a planning code and zoning map amendment titled Mission Rock Special Use District. And this ordinance would amend the planning code and the zoning map to add the Mission Rock Special Use District. There was the 1629 Market Street Special Use District, which would also amend the planning code and the zoning map. And lastly, there was a substitute ordinance of the North Beach, Telegraph Hill, Broadway, and Chinatown area controls and formula retail controls. This is a substitute ordinance to one that you heard on July 20th of this year. This substitute ordinance proposes additional changes to the off-street parking controls in the Telegraph Hill North Beach residential SUD and the Broadway and North Beach NCDs. And finally, there are 2 properties proposed for landmark designation. The first is 2731 Folsom Street, also known as the Gauguin House, and 1399 McAllister Street, which is also known as the Third Baptist Church Complex. This concludes my report of the board activities for this week. Thank you.
Commissioners, there's no board report, but the Historic Preservation Commission did meet briefly yesterday and considered and approved a certificate of appropriateness for 77 through 85 Federal Street, which is on your agenda next week, that you will be reviewing as a large project authorization and small office cap allocation. If there's nothing further, Commissioners, we can move on to general public comment, not to exceed a period of 15 minutes. At this time, members of the public may address the Commission on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission, except agenda items. With respect to agenda items, your opportunity to address the Commission will be afforded when the item is reached in the meeting. Each member of the public may address the Commission for up to 3 minutes. I do have the one speaker card.
Commissioners, my name is Francisco da Costa. I'm the Director of Environmental Justice Advocacy, but I also represent the First People, the Muwekma Ohlone. 4 of y'all I have known for a longer period, 3 of y'all for a shorter period. But in this digital world, we can monitor your deliberations when we're at home. Today I'm here to advise y'all that we have to be very careful and watch how Hurricane Harvey, Irma, Jose, and Katia will impact the East Coast. And as planners, there's only so much y'all can do. Nobody can play and nobody can fool with Mother Earth. The hurricanes teach us a lesson. And on the West Coast, we have the earthquakes, and they will teach us a lesson. Your director is a good man. I've known him for a long time. I would say from day one. The planners have to have their heart in the right place so that you can take the constituents of San Francisco, very decent, astute, and stellar constituents of San Francisco with whom I have many focus meetings, to a better place. Planning is not easy if our mission objective is not very clear. We really don't have to invite everybody to live in San Francisco. Really. And I can say that as a representative of the First People. So I'm asking you, planners, very politely, be very considerate of our infants, our children, our youth, our young adults, our seniors, and most importantly, those that have their health compromised. We do not want to see too many people, as we see today, slowly die on the streets of San Francisco. That is a clarion call to the planning commissioners to do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. DaCosta. Any additional general public comment? Seeing none, we can move to the regular calendar.
Very good, Commissioners. That'll place us on item 8 for case number 2017-004678 PCA. This is a gross floor area planning code amendment.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Audrey Buckus with the Planning Department. The proposed ordinance before you today would amend the planning code to make minor but substantive and non-substantive amendments to the definition of gross floor area. You initiated this item on June 22nd, 2017. The department has not received any public comment on this item to date. The department recommends an adoption of the proposed ordinance because it will increase clarity and improve the organization and consistency of the planning code. A substantial portion of the proposed changes can be classified as good government and are only meant to clarify the planning code. The two substantive amendments are minor, but to go over them, the first substantive amendment would remove the distinction of exempting what are called accessory buildings in C3 districts from the definition of gross floor area. Right now, C3 districts are currently exempt from including accessory buildings in a project's calculation of gross floor area. The provision is problematic for three reasons. The first is that the planning code does not define what an accessory building is. The second is that the natural composition of most parcels that are in C3 districts prevent what could be interpreted to be an accessory building from being constructed in the first place. And the third is that all other zoning districts include these type of accessory spaces in the definition of gross floor area, and there's no distinctive characteristic of a C3 district that differentiates it from all other zoning districts for the purposes of calculating gross floor area for accessory structures. The second substantive amendment would remove the required car share parking from the definition of gross floor area. Required car share parking is a mandatory condition imposed by the city in order to increase residents' sustainable transportation opportunities. Required car share parking spaces are mandated for projects that meet certain conditions, and they're also considered a transportation benefit to the community. It's therefore a benefit to the public and the development community to exclude required car share parking spaces from the definition of gross floor area in all zoning districts. All other proposed changes are considered corrective and clarifying in nature and are therefore non-substantive. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on item number 8? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I think some of this makes sense to me, but I was a little bit unclear from the case report on the description of accessory dwellings in C3, and I understand that there's no definition of accessory dwelling in the planning code, but I was unclear as to what the corollary was in other areas where there is a definition. I think in the case report, they tried to, I can try and read it. You guys made an allusion, or the case report made an allusion to their accessory dwelling units in, accessory dwellings, or accessory buildings rather, in structures in other zoning districts, but it doesn't make sense in C3, and I couldn't visualize it. So can you try to explain what was the original intent of having accessory structures in C3 zoning districts?
Sure. So again, there's no actual definition of what an accessory building is in the planning code, period. We interpreted what they meant by accessory structure. So something along that lines might be a smaller building in the back of the main building that fronts the street property. The definition was originally changed regarding the C3 districts in addition to a amalgam of changes that were made to C3 districts back in 2012. At that time, the planning department had caught what we believed to be an error in this clarification of a definition for accessory buildings in C3 districts, but unfortunately, because the changes being made at the time were so massive, that change did not, that recommendation did not get taken by the Board of Supervisors and was included, we believe, in error into the final ordinance for the major reconstruction they were doing of the C3 districts at that time. So again, there is no other accessory spaces or accessory buildings that are included in gross floor area in any other district.
And Commissioner Johnson, if I could just add to that a little bit, I think there's been a mixing and matching of terms. We do have a definition for accessory dwelling units, but this is talking about accessory structures, and
Right.
there is nothing
Sorry,
for
I mixed up
accessory.
my terms too.
Yeah,
I meant accessory
structures there.
Okay, second question. So that's helpful, and yes, I did mean accessory structures, not, I think I said accessory dwelling unit at some point. So the second substantive change, excluding car share from gross floor area, can we dig into that a little bit more? Anybody? because it seems to me that we use gross floor area. I mean, we've changed our definition so much, but we use gross floor area as the basis for a number of different calculations, TSF being just one of them. And on that makes sort of sense because car share is a method of mitigating impacts to traffic and with, shared ride and all that stuff and changing mode share. So you don't want to sort of double fee it, by including it. But it also has impacts on the calculations for other things, like for inclusionary or other different types of calculations. So can we talk about why we're doing that?
Sure, so I can definitely start on that, and maybe Anne Marie can kind of fill in the gaps that I may leave. The first thing I want to bring up is that currently, right now, the definition of gross floor area does have an exclusion for, it says, any area devoted to bicycle parking, bicycle maintenance room, or car share spaces when such features are provided as part of a development project's compliance with the Transportation Demand Management Program shall be excluded from the definition of gross floor area. So if that's the first kind of problem here, is if we're already excluding a optional car share space that a developer can choose to add as a way to meet their obligations under the Transportation Demand Management Program, why would we then essentially punish developers for something that we're requiring in the first place by requiring them to include required car share spaces in their total gross floor area count? So I hope that helps to answer one part of that question, but maybe Anne Marie can continue from where I left off.
Yeah, mine's simpler. Yours is very good and technical. I just, at a higher level, we're trying to control, the size and the bulk of the building through floor area ratio.
Yes.
And so we want to subtract the things that don't count towards that, like the bicycle parking that we require. Similarly, since we allow them to not count towards their space of good stuff that we want them to provide, the TDM car share spaces, it seems like also car share spaces that we require through the code should not be counted towards that bulk, and then they would fill it with uses that we're trying to get on site.
Oh, that makes total sense. You could argue other things as well, but we're not going to. No, I think that makes sense. I just feel like that reasoning wasn't really laid out in the case report. So, because again, car share spaces, they are exempt from TDM, for that fee, because that's the mitigation, but they're not exempt from the gross floor area for use for other things. So it's helpful to know what that reasoning is. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Commissioner Moore.
Since we clarified what accessory buildings are, if you walk around C3 in the older part of the financial district, you have taller buildings, or which used to be taller at the time when they were built, like the Shell building, etc. They all have lower portions in order to keep light and air into the inner rooms of those office buildings. And those particular portions of the buildings are called accessory buildings. So you walk around and you see them. Pay attention to that when you walk around. There's a lower portion. You say, oh, those are the ones.
Okay, cool. Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to adopt recommendation for approval, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel? Aye. Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards? And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 7-0 and places us on item 9 for case number 2017-003521 PCA. Article 8 Corrections Planning Code Amendment.
All right, so again, Audrey Butkus from the Planning Department. This proposed ordinance would amend the planning code to correct several errors and make clarifying amendments to Article 8. The changes are all intended to be corrective and clarifying in nature. They're not considered substantive changes, and similar to the last item, you initiated this item on June 22nd of this year. The department has not received any public comment on this item to date, and we recommend adoption of the proposed ordinance. Due to multiple revisions of some planning code sections, over time, text has been dropped inadvertently, spelling errors have arisen, and amendments made by one ordinance are not reflected in the subsequent legislation. This legislation is intended to correct accumulated errors in the code and to update some sections where needed. All these proposed changes can be considered good government measures meant to improve the clarity of the planning code. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Butkus. Any public comment on this item, item number 9? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioners? Commissioner Moore.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. On that motion to adopt a recommendation for approval, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 7-0 and places us on item 10 for case number 2013.3441 CWP, the South Downtown Design and Activation Plan and Informational Presentation.
Commissioners, thank you. My name is, sorry. Thank you for having me today. My name is Paul Chazen, and I'm an urban designer with the Citywide Division in the Planning Department. I'm going to talk to you about the South Downtown Design and Activation Plan. If I can get the presentation on the screen. So this is a planning effort that this is a brief overview of what I'm going to talk about today. This is kind of similar to the presentation we gave at our kickoff workshop, which was held about a month ago. And we're going to talk about why this plan is happening, a little bit about the previous planning efforts in the area, some of the goals, and then how the public will get to give input into the process. Just a quick note on nomenclature. We took some grammatical liberties. We realized SODA, the nickname, is kind of a nickname we're using for this planning effort. It's not an acronym, we're aware of that, but it's just much easier to remember. So we're calling it the SODA for short. So some context, about 10, 15 years ago, this is what the area that we're calling the South Downtown looked like. And we're looking at kind of the geographies mainly of Transbay and Rincon Hill. And you can see there wasn't a whole lot there. There's a transit center kind of in the background, and then the old transit center, and then a lot of storage and parking lots. This is Folsom Street over here, and these were freeway parcels which were vacated. They were owned by Caltrans. This is kind of what the current snapshot of the neighborhood looks like, and with some future buildings ghosted in. This is actually out of date. There's a couple buildings that are missing from this image, so you can kind of get a sense that there's a drastic change in the landscape here. And this is backed up by like 15 years of planning at least to get to this point. And so one of the things we're trying to do with this effort is there's a huge population of people living and working in the district that aren't aware of this kind of planning history. And so part of the goal is just to inform people what's happening. But there's a lot of implementation and coordination that needs to happen between city departments and the TJPA to make it all happen. These are the geographies that we're looking at. It's kind of I'm not going to get into the history of the planning, but there's redevelopment agencies now called the OCII and the Transit Center District Planning Area and Rincon Hill. And these were all, for various reasons, planned out as different geographies, but the intent was always to make them one district. So when the planning department was planning for Rincon Hill, and the redevelopment agency was planning for Transit Center District, we always kind of tried to coordinate those efforts so there was one integrated landscape. So some of the big principles here are that north of Folsom Street is kind of where an extension of downtown, that's where people work, and that's a lot of office uses kind of around the transit center. South of Folsom Street, kind of on Rincon Hill and around Folsom Street, is a residential neighborhood with Folsom acting as a kind of a commercial spine, like a neighborhood commercial street. Some big new open spaces, including Underland Park, City Park or Salesforce Park now, and Transbay Park. And then really trying to make sure that the north-south streets kind of function as one integrated landscape. And so that's kind of where we are today. This is a tool that we've made, and actually I have a packet here for the commissioners, which is something that we use internally at the planning department to just help track all the projects happening in the district. And you can see there's a number of projects moving forward. There's the pink items are public works city projects. The orange are redevelopment agency projects. The bluish color are planning department entitlements, and the yellow are by the TJPA. And so there's just a lot of buildings going up and sidewalks going up and being built. And there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen. And so, and then with this, we have some really high quality landscapes and designs moving forward in the neighborhood. I think this is something we're really excited about. It's kind of like a new step in design for San Francisco. There's some really world-class firms building both buildings and open spaces. Our goals with this effort are, this is not to relitigate and redecide all these big planning decisions. It's really an implementation effort. And there's a lot of devil in the details in trying to figure out and make sure that things are being built as we've planned. We want to enhance the built environment. And then the other big piece of this, which we're doing, is we're partnering with the East Cut Community Benefits District. It's a new organization in the neighborhood, and they are bringing some other pieces like helping work on activating and programming new public spaces, thinking about how we can enhance retail in the district, and prioritizing pedestrian safety. And then a few years ago, the Long Range Planning Division did this public outreach training. We actually showed this slide in our workshop, which was really well received. We've identified all the areas where the public will directly get to input this plan, and showed people where they fit on this kind of spectrum, this rubric for how we approach public outreach in the department. So one of the goals, like I said, is to just inform the public about all the work that's gone on and all the projects coming to their neighborhood. And we had more than 110 people show up at our initial meeting. Another goal is to ensure that we're still getting consistent streets and streetscape palettes, especially as the governor has kind of killed redevelopment, to make sure that those streets and landscapes are integrated and consistent. To help the neighborhood, this is kind of a young neighborhood with a young CBD, and the goal here is to sort of help seed a neighborhood culture. And so there's a lot of opportunity to think about how community events and programming of open spaces can help support that effort. Also, this is something I believe the Commission's expressed interest in. We're coordinating with, the current planning division and OEWD to think about how we can support better retail in the neighborhood. And then seeding some new public open spaces. We're partnering with CCA to do an architectural studio to look at this as one of the spaces, which is underneath the Bay Bridge, or the Bay at the end of Spear Street, kind of a pavement to parks-like plaza. And upgrading the bike facilities, because when the planning was done, the city was doing kind of striped bike lanes next to parked cars, and we feel like it's important to upgrade these to modern, safer bike facilities. And then trying to deal with loading, and because the way people are using and managing the curb, the city's managing the curb hasn't kept up with the modern reality, and we know that's really important in this neighborhood where there's like a lot of bus-only lanes and bike-only lanes. We're partnering with MTA to reestablish transit service to Rincon Hill. And we're working with the community to identify how we'll spend impact fee revenues that are coming in to do future streetscape improvements. We had our first workshop, like I said, we had a huge turnout. We also introduced a new design to Guy Place Park. Here's some takeaways from the workshop. I'm not going to go all into these, but there's a summary of it on our website, and there's a handout in your packet. Our intern, the CBD's intern, put this together. And here's some photos. We had some really creative, fun outreach activities where people could stamp on the wall to show open spaces, programming that they would like, or they could write on these flags and stab them into a map showing where they would like to see what they like and what they don't like about the neighborhood. And those are all recorded and on our website as well. So we expect this to take about 18 months to 2 years planning process. We have a couple of events coming up. We have the Beale Street Bonanza and Walking Tour, which you're all invited to this Sunday morning. And then we'll be doing our second community workshop the day before Halloween, and we're really excited about the opportunity there to do some Halloween-themed public outreach. I just want to thank my colleagues from the Planning Department, Ann and Courtney, as well as the East Cut CBD staff and their consultant, Andrew, Tom, Chase, and Julie. It's a tremendously creative team, and we've gotten really great feedback from the community so far. Andrew Robinson from the East Cut CBD is also here today, and that's the whole presentation. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. We'll open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on item 10? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Commissioners, Commissioner Moore.
I'm glad we are making an effort to stitch these three efforts together. They have very different time frames. They have been going on for a long, long time, and as time goes by and the attention shifts, particularly in that district it has, I'm glad to see a strong emphasis or re-emphasis on the validity of each of those plans. If I understand Mr. Jason correctly, there are no attempts to change the plans, but I like to see a strong affirmation of the plans, of each individual plan and how the plans interact. We have had several projects where the plans were blatantly ignored, and I hope that we can kind of catch up by now creating the connective tissue in between to avoid that, but create a larger language of how this knits the city together. I would have appreciated if we had had a handout. We do not speak about these plans in summary very often. No, I mean ahead of time, not in the meeting. And if you wouldn't mind, would you communicate the website of your effort to us so that we have a direct access to it? I didn't see that. You probably have it directly in your head. I don't.
Yeah, it's on the. If you actually turn the slideshow, it's on the handout as. It should be on the handout as well, but it's sfplanning.org/SOTA. You have to have a hyphen between
Okay,
SF
good.
and
Thank you so much for saying that. The public can also hear it. It's very interesting, and I look forward for all of us to be really in the lingo when it comes to approve and look at projects in this area in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. As a former successor agency commission, it is nice to see some work on these projects at the planning department and the planning commission level. I have been aware of many of these blocks and the progress on this development for some time. I think our ideas on what this area can be will change drastically once Transbay opens and some of these blocks are fully built out. This area right now is maybe Mission Bay plus 2 years after they started building, right? One where you see some buildings, but you mostly think of it as a place you go through or maybe you work there. And very soon it will be a neighborhood in its own right with an entire community, even more so than what's there right now with the existing residents. There's a lot of new supply coming online. I would just say, I know it's more MTA, but a real key to unlocking this project is going to be to make Folsom two ways. It is going to be the key to having some, I'm so bad with directions, east-west? East-west bus lines that can connect all the way down to the Mission and to other neighborhoods. Obviously, you have a lot of lines going down Mission Street, but on the other end of this sort of square area, a lot of the development is centered around Folsom Street. So that's going to be really key to the success of this area.
Commissioner Melgar.
Just had a question. So where and when on Sunday?
It is, it's on you know where the MTC building is? There's a cafe in the lobby of the MTC building, and it's kind of on Beale Street between Folsom and Harrison. And then Commissioner Johnson's point, 375 Beale. 375 Beale. But to Commissioner Johnson's point, I will also say I didn't stress this in the presentation, but we're working very closely with other agencies. We brought them all to the workshop, and we actually are helping MTA with their outreach to reestablish transit service in that corridor that you mentioned.
And make it Folsom two-way street?
Folsom's two-way is happening. It's actually designed, and I think it's out to bid. So
exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be really great.
I'm sorry, what time on Sunday?
9:30 to 11:30, but that includes the Bonanza. So there's a walking tour for the first half and the Beale Street Bonanza party, kind of a block party in the new open space between the Lumina project and 201 Folsom.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Andrew Robinson from the East Cut Community Benefit District. From 9:30 to 11, we're doing a walk shop where we have about 70 residents and stakeholders in the neighborhood who have already signed up to do walking to look at open spaces that were identified at the first meeting. And then from 11 to 2, we're having a neighborhood block party, a brunch with music, food, drink, kids' activities. So that's the event.
Thank you.
Director Ram.
Thanks. I just wanted to thank Paul and everyone for your work on this. I mean, I think to the point that was made earlier by both Paul and Commissioner Moore, this is really taking 3 or 4 different geographies in terms of plans and saying this is really one area. And, you know, the public and residents and folks who live and work down here don't recognize plan area boundaries. It's just one district, and it doesn't matter where one plan ends and another one starts. It's about creating an environment that is healthy for everyone. And so in my mind, this is the next step in making this a true neighborhood. You know, it's one thing to add a bunch of new buildings in, and even with the extraordinary densities we have down there, there still needs to be more work kind of on the soft side, if you will, of creating a neighborhood. And so that's really what this is all about. And I really think this is an important step to doing that and to recognizing that this is, you know, this larger area is really kind of the new heart of downtown. So just want to thank everyone involved. Thanks.
And I agree. I took a walk down here not too long ago just because we see the buildings a lot from the street or the skyline and not necessarily on the ground. And it was interesting because it still hasn't evolved. It doesn't have the neighborhood feel I think we anticipated having yet, and I think it's partly because it's still being built out and improvements are still being made. So I'm glad we're doing this and kind of keeping up on the implementation sides, because it is going to be, I think, a great San Francisco neighborhood, but still needs attention at the street level. Commissioner Moore.
I'm glad you're saying that, President Hill. Is one of my concerns is that the amount of construction that is still to be approved, to be built, to be realized in this area is going to make this a challenged neighborhood for many, many years to come, because the amount of traffic it needs to build these large buildings is phenomenal. And I hope that even based on last week's discussion, that we are developing more sensitivity to that being a real impact of how you create neighborhood and how you really create the kind of improvements that effectively work when they're built. I mean, when you walk there over the weekend, there's basically 24/7 construction going on. They don't stop on the weekend. And that is very detrimental for anybody who wants to live there.
If I may just add, on the Folsom Street issue, the creating a two-way street system on Folsom and Howard is actually part of the EIR for Central Soma. And it goes way beyond the Central Soma boundaries. The idea was to incorporate it into that EIR. So we're looking at the full length of those two streets, all the way from the freeway all the way into downtown to look at creating a two-way street.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioners and members of the public, items 11 and 12 have been continued, so it places us on item 13 for case number 2016-016610 CUA 3368 19th Street. This is a conditional use authorization.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michael Christensen, Department staff. The item before you is a request for conditional use authorization to establish a restaurant use in a portion of the existing specialty grocer and liquor store doing business as Royal Cuckoo Market. The site is located at 3368 19th Street in the Mission Street NCT, the Mission Alcoholic Beverage Special Use District, the Mission Interim Control Area, and a 55X Height and Bulk District. The site is a one-story building containing the Royal Cuckoo Market and a separate grocery store use. The site is surrounded by other commercial uses, including another restaurant, some personal service uses, retail stores, and upper story residential units. The proposed restaurant use would permit food service with incidental on-site beer and wine sales in conjunction with the food service. Only a small portion of the site is proposed to be operated as the restaurant use, with the remainder of the site remaining the specialty grocer and liquor store use. In total, the food service consists of a small counter area with 8 stools. The department has received over 100 letters of support of the application, with no formal opposition letters received. The project sponsor has also met multiple times with local neighborhood groups in advance of this hearing to discuss any concerns that they might have with the project. Staff has reviewed the application and found it to be compliant with the Planning Code and Planning Code Section 303 findings, including the finding that the total concentration of restaurant frontages in the immediate area should not exceed 25%. As the use meets the Planning Code, is in support of a local small business, and provides additional affordable food options for local residents, the department recommends approval of the conditional use authorization with the proposed conditions of approval. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Project sponsor? Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Go ahead.
And thanks to Michael Christensen, our planner, and for all our supporters for coming out. I just want to say, my name is Paul Miller, by the way. I'm one of the owners. It's my girlfriend, Debbie. She owns it. And my nephew's here. He's also one of the owners. And this is like a family place. It's family run. My nieces sometimes work there. My brother-in-law works there. My friends work there. My friends' children work there. We live in the neighborhood. Our neighbors know us even from outside the store. This is we're really part of the community. And so I just want to say that first. And then now about the shop. We're kind of like a hybrid shop. You know, like Michael Christensen said, we have our market where neighbors come in and get their basics, eggs and milk, a nice bottle of wine, a bottle of Amaro. But also in the front, we have a coffee station in espresso, and people can just come and go as they please all the way till we close to 10 or 11 at night, and just have a cup of coffee or come and sit down at the counter and get some food, a glass of wine. And so it makes it a real community spot. Like, people have a different reason to come in, and I see neighbors come in and meet each other. They didn't know each other before, and it's really great to see that. Now, as far as this hybrid model being a good business plan, for a small market, it's hard, very difficult, especially in the middle of a block, to succeed, competing with like Amazon, online. We don't do any of that. Whole Foods, the same thing now. We don't have what it takes. Can't do that. So we need to have this kind of model to give people a reason to come just for their standard things. It's just, for us, it's the only way to survive.
I just wanted to add quick.
Just speak into the mic, please.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I made a list of a couple things quickly that I believe that the market is, or a daytime spot on 19th Street, a warm community spot, a family-run place, employees who live in the Mission who are here. We're longtime neighbors and service workers in this neighborhood. We're involved with all our neighbors, Bethany Center, Cap Street Music, we're artists and musicians. Our families work at the Royal Cuckoo Organ Lounge and the Royal Cuckoo Market. We care about 19th and Cap. I used to live on the corner in 91. I know everyone on that street. We've been working for 3 years so far to contribute to our block, which is also 2 blocks from our house, so we really care about it. We want to keep our retail and serve food at the tiny counter so we can stay in business.
Great, thank you. We may have questions for you, but we're going to open this up first to public comment, if there is any.
Hello, my name is Joe. I'm a Mission resident for 25 years. And unfortunately, right now, there's a lot of politics going on in the Mission. There's lots of people complaining about gentrification, techies moving in, people being displaced, no housing. And it seems like you probably know, people complain constantly, we need this, we need that, we need to stop these people, get these people out, get these people in. And over 25 years, I see it, and it's becoming crazy. And when you have a market like this, it serves everyone. And we know that there was a neighborhood activist who filed a complaint against the market because he didn't like what they were doing, or it wasn't what he thought the vision of the Mission is. And it was just kind of hard for me to understand why someone would try to shut a business down and make them go through this crazy permit application again, because I don't know if you've read the report, but they currently are open, serving beer and wine, and as a market. The ABC has approved all of their permits, and they are in business. And they've had to spend, I think, over $5,000 of their own money again to reapply for the same permit they already have. So I'm just wondering what kind of compensation that they would be entitled to, and who would decide that? Any suggestions?
Unfortunately, we can't have a dialogue here, but we welcome your comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next public speaker, please.
Yes, good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Ken Walzak. I work for the City Attorney's Office here. I work just over at Fox Plaza, and I'm a devotee of the Royal Cuckoo Market. I think that it's wonderful, and I just want to speak on its behalf. I think, and speak in favor of its application. I think it's a wonderful, quiet, relaxing neighborhood space, and I've seen them do many wonderful things for the community. Just coming in to visit, I've seen them give out discounted coffee to locals who are down on their luck. I've seen them take up a collection for a regular who didn't have enough money to replace his mattress and couldn't find a comfortable bed to sleep on. I think that they're wonderful people. I think it's a lovely space, and I think it should absolutely be permitted to operate in a way that will continue to serve the community and be profitable for them. So I think the application should absolutely be approved, and they should be allowed to to continue operating.
Great, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name's Chris Siebert. I'm a local musician. I've been in the Mission for several decades and in the city for my entire adult life. I'm speaking in favor of the Royal Cuckoo Market. To me, Paul and Deb are local heroes. They run a mom and pop family business, not a chain. It's very difficult in these times. The market is a friendly neighborhood establishment, closes early, between 10 and 11 p.m. They serve local folks, neighbors, and local families. They employ only local people, most of whom are Mission residents and most of whom are bilingual, including Deb. They're very much part of the community. They live in the neighborhood, just several blocks from the place. I have a special interest in it as a musician because they also run a small bar, which is one of the last jazz venues in the city. So they're very much part of the cultural fabric of the city. I think they're the type of business that the city should be fighting to help. And it's a little strange to me that they're in any kind of jeopardy at all. So I'd just like to say that I'm speaking for a lot of musicians, excuse me, a lot of musicians and artists who are very concerned about this right now. And I should also mention they employ some local jazz legends, Fillmore jazz legends like Jules Broussard and Mary Stallings, people who've been part of the cultural fabric of the city for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, all part of this very artist-friendly business that we're all coming out to support. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is William Osens Pihil. I'm actually one of the owners of Puerto Alegre Restaurant, a family restaurant that's been in the Mission for close to 50 years. And we're three generations of Mission raised. And I'm just here to support some really good friends like Paul and Debbie. Debbie's been a really long good friend of mine for over 27 years. She's been an employee at our restaurant for like 12 to 14 years. And what I see now in their market kind of shows some of the stuff we were doing when we were young, as a mom and pop organizations, surviving and all that and working hard with family and friends to support ourselves and all that. And I'm here today to say that I'm really behind them and I support them and they're really good people, they're good folks and all that. And they contribute a lot to the Mission and all that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Bill McLeod. I was born in San Francisco. I was raised in San Francisco. For the past 25 years, I've lived and worked in the Mission. Right now, I live just 2 or 3 blocks from the market we're talking about. If you walk through the Mission, there are a lot of places, retail spaces that are now shuttered. There are other retail spaces that have become very high-end restaurants, high-end retail, and it makes no sense to me to make these folks who are running a small, locally owned, locally run business that serves really absolutely everybody, to make them bend over backwards to make concessions to self-appointed neighborhood groups, self-anointed. I've eaten several times at the market. You can get soup for $5 or $6. You can get a beer for maybe $5. It's a great place to go for dinner. And I think it should continue. I think this is exactly the kind of business the Planning Commission should support and shouldn't threaten. When they opened, I remember a much bigger corner market that's right around the corner from where I live. A guy who owns 3 corner liquor stores said these guys, there's no way they're going to survive. It's a tiny middle-of-the-block store. There's just no way they're going to survive. I think what they've done and turning into a community space with affordable food and affordable drink, I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see more of it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Carrie Swing. I'm a Mission resident. I'm urging you to support the Royal Cuckoo Market. They're keeping the money in San Francisco as opposed to having a shop at Target or Amazon. I think local residents feel a certain pride in supporting local businesses, and especially ones that do unique things and keep the arts focus and a local focus in the Mission District, which is known for that. So I just want to voice my support for this project, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Pete Glickstern. My folks moved to San Francisco in 1979 from the former Soviet Union. I have lived and worked in the Mission 2 decades now. I did 2 stints as president of the Mission Merchants Association back in the early 90s, or late 90s, early 2000s. We all know our town, and there's always going to be someone to oppose just about anything that anyone else proposes. And the best that I can see, and my view is pretty good because I only live a block and a half down the street, 19th. This is as much of a no-brainer as you're ever going to get put in front of you. It's a locally owned, locally run micro business, and just about everyone in the neighborhood is behind them 100%. We would really, really appreciate you guys approving this thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hi there, I'm Eden Stein. I'm the president of the Mission Bernal Merchants Association and also the owner of Secession Art and Design, Paz Cesar Chavez, and I'm here to support the Royal Cuckoo Market. For 7 years, they've owned the Royal Cuckoo right across from my retail space in Mission Bernal, and I've gotten to know the owners. We had a fire about 1.5 years ago, and they were one of the first bars to step up and do a lot of fundraising for the 3300 Club that lost their bar, and they have every step of the way. I see them from my window while I'm working my own retail store and hustling and trying to keep a local business alive. I see them working and being supportive of their community. On 19th, I've been into their business. I've had a glass of wine, and I completely support them, and I hope that you support them also.
Thank you, Ms. Stein.
Afternoon. My name is Pete. Pete Lee. I've been in the Mission for about 12 years, and I'm a filmmaker here. I'm also speaking in support of Royal Cuckoo, and to just add to what Eden mentioned earlier, there's been quite a few fires, unfortunately, in the last year, and I've done a few fundraisers for, folks in Oakland, folks in Chinatown, folks in the Mission. And members of the Royal Cuckoo have always stepped up for whatever kind of support. So I think that speaks to something. And also just haven't been here for so long, I'm sure as you guys have witnessed as well. There's so many businesses. They're beautiful, they're exquisite, and that are just hanging ever so perilously. And I think sometimes all it takes is, just setbacks and unexpected challenges to kind of take them off their game or really just knock them down. So really thank you for your consideration for whatever they're applying for. I don't know what it's called, but I hope you approve it.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Annie Rivera. I am the Executive Director of Galeria de la Raza on 24th and Bryant, and I am also a Mission Bernal resident. I work with the Mission Bernal Merchants Association, and I'm here in support of the Royal Cuckoo Market. I have had the pleasure of experiencing the Royal Cuckoo Bar as an extension of our public living rooms. I live in a tiny one-bedroom. Housing is really tough. And so these bars and these public spaces really do operate as our extension of our homes. And I've had the best meetings and brokered deals utilizing the Royal Cuckoo. And I know that if it's in that spirit that they're operating off on 19th Street, we should be supporting an establishment of that nature. It's also, as a queer woman of color, I've had the privilege of being able to hear some of the best music and supporting musicians of color. Tammy Hall, amazing pianist that lives in Mission Bernal, and we get to see her, and again, in the extension of our living room. So I want to reiterate and ditto everything that everyone has said here. It is important for us to think about how we think about the development of our city, but it's really crucial that we do not target and demonize people that are doing good work in our community. And it is time for us to rise and be critical about how we engage in these conversations. I don't know the owners personally. I don't need to know them personally to know they're doing good work. And that I'm putting my work, every day I work with the Merchants Association because we have to protect what's there. We're a small village, and they are an extension of that family that we have at Mission Bernal. So please support them. And I continue to want to work with you on the different sort of restrictions, regulations. We need that if we're going to keep our city of San Francisco what it is. But they are the part of the soul and heart of that community. So please support them. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dixie Tracy Kinney. I've lived in San Francisco for 48 years. I've lived on 16th Street for 38 of those years, so I've seen a lot of the changes that have happened in this neighborhood. I also know what it's like to try and run a small business there. I worked for Katz Bagels for 10 years, and I've known Debbie since she was putting herself through school and working at Puerto Alegre, and I know that they are truly the heart of the community that I know there. And I just wanted to come support them.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
My name is Chris Collins. I've been an activist member of the Mission Merchants Association since 1982. I'm the treasurer and the newsletter editor. And I came by this unexpectedly, returning from a board meeting at Mission Neighborhood Centers where Paul and Debbie drop off their day-old pastries for our senior program. I was so surprised to see it. There didn't seem to be any reason for this wonderful, almost work of art kind of business that had organically grown over the period of a few years from a very dilapidated, rundown space. And so I'm hoping here that we are at the end of the line and we have some greater perspective on it. It is about a beer and wine license. And I think that in that respect, it's very important for precedent because if we're going to keep the retail space vibrant in the Mission, we have to allow creativity to come forward. It's a very challenging time for retail. You read about it all the time in the paper. And now Amazon's moving in on the periphery on 3 spots very close to the Mission. And how are we going to make retail not keep increasing its vacancy rate, which is already at a level that most of us haven't seen before, is a challenge that I think you guys face. And so allowing entrepreneurial spirit to not be too burdened by regulations and permit process is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is LaVey Smith, and I'm I'm here to support the Royal Cuckoo Market. Such a wonderful, wonderful place, and along with the bar, supports local musicians, legends like Freddie Hughes, Denise Perrier, myself. I'm going to put myself in that category. Those are my idols, but I'm so grateful for this market. I live in the neighborhood just 2 blocks from the market itself. And with all these new places opening up, I don't really recognize my neighborhood. This is like an old school artist bohemian. It's like Cafe Bohemia on 24th, very similar, but it also has a store. So I'm very grateful, and I urge you to please keep this beautiful little gem in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next speaker. I realize people are passionate about this, but if we can ask you to refrain from clapping, you can wave your hands, but it's something that we can keep this moving and you can get back to opening the business. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Connie Ye, and I live around the corner. I'm no one special, but I have had the pleasure to live near the Royal Cuckoo for 2 years, seen them probably every week for coffee and breakfast. It's a place really where I see diverse ages, hear English and Spanish. and it's a place I go to before Dolores Park. They keep my keys from my neighbors. I just wanted to really help reinforce that normal people can come here too, and I would really hope to see you around there too. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hey there, I'm Jimmy Singer. I live just around the corner, grew up in the Bay Area, and then I left for about 10 years. And when I came back, I felt like I didn't really recognize it. I lived in New Orleans, and New Orleans has a little different pace. And what's really special about the culture there is it fosters creativity and community. And I think it's because there's so many places you can go and sit, and no one's rushing you out to get the check, to make another table turn, to then pay their rent, right? It's just a little easier. And then I found the Royal Cuckoo Market, and I felt like, oh man, there's a space in San Francisco where you can sit and no one's pushing you out to turn the table to make another buck. And I think that's really unique and special in San Francisco today. You walk Valencia, you see the restaurants turn every 6 months. They're all fast casual, go to the counter, move on. I think Royal Cuckoo is casual and slow, and I think it's really important for people to meet each other, to sit and to linger. And it's one of the only spaces in the city that exists like that. So I support them getting their permit.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
Commissioners, good afternoon. Phil Lesser, President of the Mission Merchants Association. Two prior presidents were just up here, Peter Glickstern and Chris Collins. I'm just going to echo what they said. We're honored to have these people in the Mission District. I'm the fourth generation to do retail in the Mission District. We have the fifth generation down there, 24/7, Fiesta Laundromat. If anybody can appreciate doing business on a day-to-day basis, having your door open to whatever comes in on the Mission, we have that appreciation. I have nothing but respect for these people and what they do. This is a little micro version of what you saw last month. Remember, we came to you with the mottos, 21st in Valencia. Same thing. They're trying to do several things to stay alive. Please accept the recommendation of the Planning Department and approve this. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Thank you all for coming down to testify. Commissioner Melgar.
Thank you. I am in support of this project. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I heard from folks who were opposed to it and why I don't agree. I think that, we've seen, and Commissioner Christine Johnson next to me has spoken a lot about the changes in the retail and the effect that that's going to have on retail corridors around the city and how we're preparing for these changes, given that now we live in a world of Amazon and, instant doorstep retail. And, I think that having these hybrid business models that make use of small, older spaces in our commercial corridors is exactly the kind of thing that we want to be encouraging. Now, I understand the issues around liquor licenses and the effect that that has had on the gentrification of the Mission and in the commercial corridors. I don't think that this is applicable here. I think that, we, of course, want to be thoughtful about the price points that businesses that are, being cited, especially along Valencia and 24th Street, and what I can keep talking, right, Jonas? and sort of what we're building in terms of the business corridors and how that supports what we want to do there with MAP 2020 and preserving the culture and the vibrancy of the Mission. I don't think that this is the case for this business. I actually think it's the opposite. It is a community, based business owned by a family that is long-term Mission residents that employs people there, and I think it's exactly what we want to be supported. I'm going to vote for it.
Thanks. Commissioner Moore.
I'm in strong support of this project, partially because I have a big heart for small business, and this commission is very, very open to supporting local homemade business, that is to say, San Francisco businesses. I believe that the testimony that you all rendered was very persuasive. It really spoke to those issues, why this commission supports small business. It is really San Francisco made, and is an integral part of the neighborhood who spoke in support. I did not hear any convincing opposition to speak of, and I basically say let's approve it. Move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Richards.
So it's interesting. This is exactly what San Francisco is to me, this business. This is what the mission should be more like. It used to be like, but we're kind of losing it. We talk about keeping artists in the city. This is a great way to keep them in the city by allowing them to make a living and still perform their art. I agree with Commissioner Melgar. We sit up here week in, week out, and we get told all kinds of things by all kinds of people. And lots of times I'm very skeptical. I'm not skeptical at all here. I absolutely trust this business and trust these longtime residents that they know that this is a business they want to keep and they're not going to flip it. I'm impressed by the testaments that I read in the packet, also by the folks who spoke here today. Just one question for, I guess, the director and staff. We have the small business processing program. Would this have been something that could have gone through that quicker and cheaper?
This one wouldn't qualify for CB3P since it involves alcohol.
Okay, got it. Okay, anyways, Ms. Smith, I miss you. You used to come up to Cafe du Nord, and since they don't do music anymore, I haven't seen you. It's been probably years. One other thing, the merchants president for Upper Market sitting right over there in the check shirt. When you want to open your second location, please see the man with the mustache, because I think we'd welcome you in our neighborhood too. I definitely want to support.
Thanks. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I was hoping that somebody would just say move to approve as the first comment, and then we could just, already. No, but like the first thing, and then the last thing. And I wasn't going to say anything, but now I must get on my soapbox. No, I'm just joking. I'm highly supportive here. I second everything that Commissioner Melgar has said. I have made many comments in the past about the changing nature of retail in the city. In order to be a sole proprietor or family-owned business with one location or a couple of locations, you need to have multiple revenue streams. The idea of the mom-and-pop shop that just sells small trinkets or jockeys or groceries or something, and that's all they do, it's not viable anymore. And if it is, it's maybe for short term. You might be able to make it for a couple years before it's a challenge. So I really support this business. I wanted to echo something that Commissioner Melgar said in terms of what we heard from the opposition prior to today. One of the complaints I've gotten, I've met with the Calle 24 people many times, and they've said things like they don't like the idea of just a wine bar opening because part of their reasoning around creating the cultural district, ancillary reason is to make the district family friendly, and they don't consider places that have liquor licenses, and that's primarily what they serve or what they do. As very family friendly. And obviously I don't think that this fits the bill. Again, yet another reason to have sort of multiple revenue streams, multiple different types of activities going on in the same space. So I hope that we see more of this model, because this is what's going to allow the entrepreneur, sole proprietor, one or two locations to survive. So really glad you guys are there. Obviously, I think you're already operating. I don't know if we made that clear, but you're already there. So that's great. Maybe I'll make it down there one day with my son, who's very little. He'll just run around and break stuff that I will not pay for. Just so you know. But yeah, very supportive. Thank you all.
Commissioner Fong.
Keep the arts alive. I second the motion to approve.
Director Ram.
Thanks. Obviously, the department is in support of this project for all the reasons that the Commission mentioned. I do think I just wanted to mention that some of the members of the community were not able to be here for a couple logistical reasons, and many of you have heard from them, and I appreciate that. And I think one of their concerns is simply the potential expansion of the liquor license and the program in the future and setting a precedent. So I think it would be helpful if the Commission be clear that what you're approving today is for the size of restaurant and space that they have today, so that future expansions could be reviewed by staff or Commission in the future.
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm clearly not going to vote no on it just because we add that, but I will voice my opposition to that sort of restriction. I think we have to, if there does choose to be an expansion, which I'm not sure what form that would take. I don't know if that's a lot merger or just expansion. I don't know what form that might take in the future. I don't think we can foreclose that option if that's something that works for the community and that's something that this business needs to stay open. Obviously, it's not something that would be automatic. There would be another hearing. There'd be another opportunity to know. Yeah, well, right. No, if it's above a certain size, right?
It would have to go above a certain size to be a hearing.
Right. So I think that's the concern, right? That there would be an expansion above the thresholds that we have in our planning code, in which case there would be a hearing and an opportunity to say yes or no. And we have had times when we don't always say yes to those types of expansions. So I'm just not in agreement with putting that sort of restriction right now. And I don't even know if we can, because it's a future permit that we haven't seen yet.
Commissioner Richards?
I guess we wouldn't be treating this business any differently than any other business in a neighborhood commercial corridor. If they trip a certain size, they'd have to come before us. So it's kind of just the way it is.
Yeah.
If now you know what the rules are. If you want to expand, come on back. Let's talk.
Keep in mind, commissioners, the reason why that this is even before you is per the mission interim controls, so that require the restaurant use. So typically, restaurant uses in this corridor wouldn't trigger a conditional use authorization, but the interim controls, which expire in January of next year, are the trigger point. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioners, there's a motion that has been seconded to approve this matter with conditions. On that motion, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 7-0. Commissioners, that'll place us on item 14 for case number 2017-004807 CUA at 1143 Grant Avenue, conditional use authorization. If I could ask those members of the public who may be exiting these chambers, if you could do so ever so quietly. We have other business to attend to. Thank you.
Good afternoon, President Hillis and Commissioners. I am Seema Dina, Planning Department staff. The item before you is a request for conditional use authorization to establish a formula retail use for a financial service doing business as CTBC Bank USA. The project site is located at 1143 Grant Avenue in a mixed-use building within the Chinatown Community Business Zoning District and would occupy an approximately 4,000 square foot commercial space. The tenant space is currently vacant but was previously occupied by another financial service. CTBC Bank USA, which is headquartered in Los Angeles, has 255 locations worldwide, but this is the only location they maintain in San Francisco. Within 300 feet of the project vicinity, there are 2 financial service uses and 1 limited financial service use. Also within 300 feet of the project vicinity, there are 5 formula retail businesses of a variety of uses. Based upon a survey of uses completed, the addition of CTBC Bank USA would increase the concentration of formula retail uses by less than 5% in the zoning district and by less than 1% in the vicinity. The increase is considered nominal. To date, the department has not received any correspondence regarding the project, other than the letters of support provided by the project sponsor included in your packets. The department finds the project to be necessary, desirable, and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood for the following reasons. The subject tenant space is currently vacant and would not displace an existing tenant. The project would activate a ground floor space with the neighborhood serving use. The project would increase the concentration of formula retail uses by a nominal percentage. The project meets the requirements of the Planning Commission's performance-based design guidelines. The project site is well served by public transit. The project complies with the applicable requirements of the Planning Code and is consistent with the objectives and policies of the general plan. With that said, the department recommends approval of the project, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item? Oh, sorry, we have project sponsor. That's you, Mr. Lesser. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, President Hillis and commissioners. Good afternoon again. We go from the Mission to Chinatown, which is one of the wonderful things about our fabulous city. Part of Chinatown, if you go a block over, you're in an Italian neighborhood, so it's absolutely fantastic. One of the things I'm enjoying the most about the Formula Retail program is people say, can you go out there and do the survey, and can you help us go through the ropes? And I did that, and this is absolutely wonderful. Last year we were here with Cricket, you may recall, on 1100 Grant Avenue, the cell phone Sifu, the master of cell phone Chinatown. And then right across the street, we have a vacant space. It's been vacant for quite some time. Had, as you heard, a bank there for some 10 years. And now I get an opportunity to walk around this wonderful city that I was born in and see what's 21st century Chinatown looks like. And it is an absolute wonderful place. And going up and down the streets with Gary Fan, who's Senior Vice President from CTBC Bank, which is out of Taiwan, who's here to speak to you today, we found nothing but enthusiasm. Everybody knows this bank, even though it's not here. And again, we were in Chinatown, and everybody's had either direct relations with it or indirect relations with somebody that they knew. Extremely enthused to see that this bank would be coming along with Bank of America and all the rest that we already have. But this one seems to fit that community extremely well, and obviously the signage is going to also be in Chinese, so it's going to fit the character of the neighborhood extremely well. So Gary's going to speak to you about local employment and the Community Reinvestment Act and those sorts of things, which were brought to the attention of Chinatown Development Corporation and was brought to the attention of the Chinatown Merchants Association. You have a letter of support, by the way, from Chinatown Merchants Association. It's brought to the attention of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. You also have a letter of support from the Chinese Chamber of Commerce in your packet, as well as dozens of letters of support from merchants just within a couple blocks of the site that we're talking about. We also have the owner of the building, one of the most prominent buildings in Chinatown, the SW Hotel, named after Sam Wong. We have his grandson here today, Tiger Wong, basically to tell you about why he sees this as such a good fit within his building and his neighborhood. So that said, let me ask Gary Fan to take the podium.
Hi, Commissioners. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Gary Fan. I work for CTBC Bank. I came across this opportunity, and I think meeting the landlord and a lot of the community folks that live in the area, I think the bank that I work for can provide some services and can help support, build the community that Chinatown is. I think there's two main priorities for us as an organization that relates to sort of the communities this community that particularly that we want to serve. I think the first one is the Community Reinvestment Act. I think as an organization, as a community bank in the U.S., we're really focused on trying to help small business grow and kind of reinvesting back into the communities that we serve. We're doing that in the existing locations that we have throughout California, and that's something that we want to continue to do here in Chinatown. I do think the individuals that live in Chinatown also have a need to speak in other languages, and I think in order to properly service that need, one of the things that we want to do from a hiring standpoint is to hire locally and hire individuals that work and live in the city to help staff up this branch for us. So I I'm here just representing the bank and really hope that we can get this moved forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is that okay?
President Hollis, fellow commissioners, my name is Tiger Wong. I am the third generation operator of the SW Hotel. My grandfather, Samuel Wong, bought the building in 1956. We started operating the hotel early '65. All those years, I remember there were only 3 tenants in this location at 1143 Grant. The former tenant was a bank called First Bank. They were there approximately 10 years. First Bank consolidated as part of their restructuring, and for a year and a half, I could not find anyone that was willing to come in to take over 5,000 safety deposit boxes. So the former bank left these boxes there, and we aggressively tried to find another bank that was suitable for our community. CTBC Bank approached us, and I hope you will support this bank because they are operating like we are, a family-run bank. They're a public bank now, but their motto is "We are family." And the way we are operating the SW Hotel was a small family operation of about 15 staff, and we look for your support in presenting CTBC an opportunity to work in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. So we'll open this item up for public comment. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Commissioners. Commissioner Moore.
It's an interesting story. It comes alive when you hear the owner of the building speak to the history of the bank. As you all know, we have very strict restriction on formula retail in the Chinatown neighborhood commercial district. We just a few weeks ago went about updating them and taking a very close look at them. I am a little bit concerned about that within 300 feet. There are 3 financial institutions, one in particular, I'm looking over to Mr. President Fong, has been on my visor for a number of years because they do disturb the character of the street very strongly, and nothing has been done about it. I will not mention names, that is inappropriate, but I believe that this particular bank fits in, and your story, Mr. Wong, kind of really pushed it over the edge for me, because we need the voice of what is really happening. I am not a strong supporter of any further formula retail on Grand Street and in the commercial corridors that have a particular language of their own, but in this particular case, I will be supporting it.
Move to approve.
Second.
Commissioners, seeing nothing further, there's a motion that has been seconded to approve this matter with conditions on that motion. Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson? Excuse me. Commissioner Koppel?
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 6-0. Commissioners, that'll place us under your discretionary review calendar for item 15, case number 2017-001756 DRP at 1906 Market Street. This is a discretionary review.
Good afternoon again, President Hillis and Commissioners. The item before you is a request for discretionary review of a building permit proposing a change of use from an approximately 2,000 square foot laundromat to a restaurant. The restaurant is Canteen SF, who would occupy one of 4 commercial spaces at the ground floor of an existing 6-story mixed-use building. The project also includes interior and minor exterior tenant improvements. The subject property is located on the southwestern corner of Market Street and Laguna Street within the moderate-scale neighborhood commercial transit district. The proposed restaurant use is principally permitted in the NCT 3 per Planning Code Section 752 and satisfies the Planning Code requirements for a ground floor active use at this location. The DR requester is Sonia Traus. The DR requester is not acting on behalf of an organization or neighborhood group and is located approximately 1 mile from the site. The DR requester's concerns are as follows, and more details are provided in your packets. The preservation of neighborhood serving retail uses, the preservation of existing housing and neighborhood character, the preservation of the cultural and economic diversity of neighborhoods, access to laundry services in neighborhoods. To date, this department has received 31 phone calls and emails of opposition and 51 letters of support. Provided for you are additional letters of support and opposition received since your packets have been published. The department recommends the commission not take DR, discretionary review, and approve the project as proposed, since the project is principally permitted and meets the goals and objectives of the general plan. An item-by-item response is provided in your packets, but in short, the project is a small, locally owned business referencing the Scandinavian history of the neighborhood and its cuisine. The project would occupy roughly 2,000 square feet which is well below the permitted use size in this district, preserving the neighborhood character of small storefront spaces. Furthermore, the restaurant use is not displacing the existing laundromat. Staff has been advised that private contractual agreements between Little Hollywood Laundrette and the landlord precluded the renewal of a long-term lease. Therefore, the space is becoming vacant. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Strauss, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you. So sorry my letter was yesterday. I hope that you had a chance to look at it. I guess the first thing I want to say is that the idea that it's not displacing the laundromat is not clear or obvious at all. The private contractual relationship was that the landlord told the laundromat, we are going to double your rent. So then the laundromat chose to leave. So that's not a free choice. You know, this is not a case where the laundromat owners were like, we want to retire, we're leaving, we're giving our notice, we're gone. That is not the situation. As far as the laundromat was concerned, they had been operating, and I don't think that absent this threat to double the rent, they would have left. And actually, this particular claim is the DR requester's strongest argument in favor of their discretionary review, their claim that they are going to double the rent and that they're going to refuse to let it be, used as a laundromat. That's their argument, and I don't think that that's a good argument. First of all, because I don't know if I believe it. Right? They went ahead with this assuming that they were just going to get their change of use permit no matter what. The idea that this storefront is worth double the rent is something that relies on them getting this change of use. And if they don't get this change of use, they will be in a completely different position. If this was an individual, sure, we've seen individuals have a grudge against the city and refuse, to let out their retail space, but this is actually a big business, and at some point they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, why is this empty? So I don't know if I believe this threat that they're just going to let it be empty. But now here's really the meat of the argument. Laundromats are disappearing. They are an essential neighborhood serving business like groceries. The city, for groceries and movie theaters, has special preservation, kind of regulations to ensure that we have access to those things. Movie theaters aren't even really essential. They're just nice. Groceries are essential. The city absolutely needs to carefully consider decisions around allowing laundromats to disappear. So the DR requester has a claim that there are 8 other laundromats in the area. That's not true. So not only are laundries disappearing over the last 40 years, but before your eyes, 5 are disappearing right now. 2 of them are a 10-minute walk away, which I don't think counts as close by for a business where you're carrying something bulky. One of them only does dry cleaning. Red Star is already closed. It was turned into housing, which, as you know, on balance, I think is a good idea. The option here isn't turning it into housing. The option here is turning it into a restaurant, and restaurants could go in other places. And then, Mission Bubbles is closed because they had equipment problems. Hopefully it'll reopen. And so it really only leaves 3 other laundromats, and one of them is in a single-story building, which means it also could close to be torn down to be turned into housing. So there really aren't a lot of other laundromats in the area. So this is actual anti-gentrification effort. That there's a lot of controversy here before you about whether building new housing causes gentrification or ameliorates it. And one of the arguments against building new housing is that it will cause these downstream effects on retail that will then make it difficult for existing residents to continue to live in the area, even when the particular housing being proposed doesn't directly displace anyone. But here, actually, this is really what the DR process, I think, was made for. You know, that we have these priority policies. We want to protect neighborhood serving businesses. We want to protect the ability of a diverse group of people to be able to live in an area. And one of the ways to directly make sure that that is possible is to make sure that they have access to the services that they need. And Little Hollywood or some other laundromat in general is exactly that type of service that low-income people need, high-income people need too, anyone who doesn't have their own laundry. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Truss. We'll open this up for public comment in those who are supporting the DR and opposed to the project. Seeing none, we'll. Do you have public comment supporting the DR? Seeing none, we'll move to the project sponsor. You have a 5-minute presentation. And then we'll take public comment in support of the project.
Can I just ask real briefly? I've never done this before.
Sure.
Do all of our speakers have to fill out the blue forms?
They don't, no.
They do not, okay.
Right. So you have 5 minutes as the project sponsor, and then speakers will have 3 minutes each.
Okay, and that gets shown?
It's right on the podium there. You'll see it pop up. Go ahead, and you need to speak into the mic.
How do we turn this on? To
It's
the
on.
monitors? Oh, lovely.
Oh, there it is, okay, got it.
So good morning, commissioners. My name is Chris Sullivan. I'm the architect for the proposed restaurant cantina, which is going into the place which is currently being vacated by Little Hollywood Laundromat. I'd like to make recommendation that to reinforce what planning has said to approve the restaurant in the space. I'd like to introduce the owners of the restaurant. This is Nicole Asatola and Joaquim Majhom.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Nicole Azatola, and I'm the owner of Canteen. Canteen, spelled K-A-N-T-I-N-E, is the Danish word for canteen, a casual eatery where people gather and share good food. We'll just kind of make it work. The canteen we hope to open at 1906 Market Street will serve breakfast, lunch, and brunch 6 days a week. The food we will serve will be made from scratch using quality ingredients, and our menu will feature simple and accessible dishes for our patrons. Open-faced sandwiches, savory and sweet porridges, and handmade pastries are just a few of the items we'd like to offer. In addition, we would like to sell beer and wine. However, to make Canteen a reality, we need to be able to move forward. Commissioners, we thank you for your time to familiarize yourselves with our case. As of this morning, we have received 51 letters of support, and we've also made copies of these letters, but I can see you have already received them. We have a bunch of supporters here in the audience, if they wouldn't mind just standing up for a minute or raising their hands. Thank you. As you know, Little Hollywood Laundrette chose not to renew its lease when it expired on October of 2015, and the space was put on the market on June of 2016. My husband and I saw the space on August 5th, 2016, and 5 months later, we signed a lease. We were very excited to have finally found a perfect space for our Scandinavian-inspired restaurant, and coincidentally, in a historically Scandinavian part of the city. However, there was a very unfortunate side to the story, too, because previous to the hanging of the change of use signs in the windows of 1906, few people knew that the laundromat wasn't renewing its lease. Customers were shocked to read the signs, and what's worse, even the employees of Little Hollywood were unaware that their workplace was destined to close. After the DR was filed on June 1st, I initiated a meeting with the DR requester to gain insight to the reasons for filing, and we met about a month later. I grew up in a town outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and as a teenager, I worked at my father's donut shop. The donuts and coffee were good, but the real thing that kept customers coming back was a sense of community there. On July 20th, Yorkham and I held a neighborhood meeting as an opportunity to share our visions and get feedback from the neighborhood. It was at this meeting we truly got a sense of how Little Hollywood was more than just a place to wash clothes. It was a place where neighbors met one another. To hear neighbors at the meeting speak so fondly of a local business reminded me of my dad's donut shop. From what Yorkham and I heard at that meeting and during our walks around in the neighborhood to the neighborhood businesses, it became even more apparent how important it was for us to preserve our visions of creating a local spot for this engaged community. Our mission is to bring a new kind of eatery to the neighborhood, to promote local small business initiatives, to encourage females in the restaurant industry, and to support the notion that San Francisco is also a place for families with children. And lastly, to those who live close to 1906, we are sorry to see your local spot disappear, but if we're allowed, we would like to establish a gathering place once again. Please allow me to introduce my better half.
Thank you. My name is Joachim Mayholm. I'm going to tell you about the laundry options in the neighborhood. So, while we do understand that it must be frustrating for some to see the laundromat close, there are fortunately alternatives nearby. We went to 14 laundry facilities close to 1906 Market Street. 6 of them offer self-service. They're all open today. Typically coin-operated machines, and all of them are open from early morning until late 9 to 10 p.m. Additionally, 9 of the places offer laundry service like Wash and Fold, all within half a mile or a 10-minute walk from 1906. Furthermore, the residents living above the space have their own laundry facilities in the basement. The fact of the matter is that the laundromat business isn't what it used to be. The listing agent for 1906 has stated that at no time during the 8 months the space was marketed did anyone express a desire to continue running a laundromat there. So now it's empty with paper on the windows, and we urge the commissioners to allow us to move forward with our
Excuse me,
project.
sir. Unfortunately, your time is up, but you
Thank
do have a 2-minute rebuttal.
Sure.
So we'll open this up now for public comment, those in support of the project and opposed to the DR. And you can line up on the screen side of the room and come up in any order. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Daniel Bergerac, President of Castro Merchants. Upper Market Castro, where we are currently enjoying a 10% retail vacancy. This is due to the changing retail climate. We have lost Books Inc. We even lost a CVS in our neighborhood. To me, this is a no-brainer. This is a business that has closed down, and thankfully, there is a business ready to go in there. I would certainly hope that you fully support their request for the change of use. And I'd like to remind you that the 320 members of the Castro Merchants unanimously voted in favor of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker, please.
Hello, I'm Bruce Cole. I'm the publisher of Edible San Francisco Magazine, and I'm here to support Nicole Yorkham and the restaurant Canteen. Nicole actually contributes seasonal recipes every issue to my magazine, inspired by our Danish culinary traditions with a California point of view. But in our last issue, we featured women chefs of San Francisco who leveraged their restaurants to organize neighborhoods around local political change. And as chefs and restaurateurs, they resist and fight back against the current administration through either by donating their profits to other community organizations or providing restaurant spaces to groups looking to organize and feed a resistance. So I just wanted to point out and remind everyone that restaurants just aren't a place for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're a place where food and community are inseparable. Now, none of this has come to fruition yet with Canteen since it's yet to open, but in knowing Nicole and Yorkham, I can confidently say that they'll not only be bringing the best rye bread and small bread sandwiches in the city, but they'll also be enthusiastically joining the kind of food system that San Francisco is famous for: sustainable, equitable, and welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of Canteen. My name is Pamela Mendelson, and I'm a real estate broker, and I helped Nicole and Yorkham find the space that they are leasing now. I want to tell you a little bit about the process. I met Nicole and Yorkham in October 2015. It took us 2 years to get to this point. They came strongly recommended from many, many San Francisco chefs and expressed their heartfelt hopes in opening a restaurant that featured hearty, healthy, and approachable food from Denmark. We pre-qualified them. They had varying experiences, both superb. We vetted out the concept, which we felt was interesting, new, fresh, and all-inclusive, and a great value. They had their own personal money in place to build out a space, and their passion was in abundance. We shared our resumes and decided to work together and decided to set out on looking for a location. Their first and most important thing was to be close to their home and their children's school, which are both in the Castro. They were looking for an opportunity where breakfast and lunch would work, with the possibility of being open late at night for community events and as a gathering space. They were looking for a customer of varying ages, generally well-educated, and of different, looking for healthy alternatives. We had a list of needs. We needed to find a space with venting, which is very, very hard in the city if there isn't already venting in place. They had specific utility calculations, and if you haven't been through the process and have to get electric or gas to your space, it can take up to 7 months, and the landlords expect the tenants to pay for the rent during that time. They had a specific size and shape. They needed to have ADA code compliant space, an earthquake retrofitted space, and something south-facing. We next had to deal with rent. They couldn't afford a lot of rent. They couldn't look at locations on Castro or Hayes or Church or anywhere else. The rent here is $4 a square foot. That is a very low rent in San Francisco by neighborhood standards. We needed to find a space that had upgrades to it. They couldn't afford to go through the gas or utility process, and they couldn't afford key money. A lot of times in San Francisco, you pay key money if you want a space that already has a restaurant in it, that has venting or has a liquor license. We searched high and low. We went through every publication. We toured over 100 different properties with contractors, inspectors, subs, mechanicals. We did food tasting for landlords. We came across 4 locations, 298 Goff. The landlord turned us down. He did not want a daytime operation. He only wanted a nighttime operation. We put in an offer at 1406. The landlord turned us down. He wants to tear down the building, and he wants to develop high-rise housing. We put in an offer at 2198.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Christian, and I'm a resident of Noe Valley, living on Elizabeth Street. In my daily work, I work for the Danish Foreign Ministry, where we try to build bridges between Denmark in terms of business, culture, and also on the political side. When I heard that Joachim and Nicole was planning to open a restaurant, I was really happy and wanted to support them in all the manner that I could. I'm not only standing here as an official representative to Denmark, but I'm also standing here as a dad to a girl who was born here in San Francisco last summer. And I think that we all can agree that food is a huge part of every culture, and opening up a restaurant that will be serving Danish food will be not only a way for me and my family to enhance the cultures of the Danish culture, but also other families in the area. So I hope that you do support opening of this restaurant, since there are no other Danish restaurants in the city. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Will Hall. I am a friend of Yorkham and Nicole. I met them about a year ago when our kids were enrolled at the same public school together. They started in kindergarten, became really good friends. I think I'm speaking more as a character reference today, but you know, they've made us feel so welcome. And when we talk about community and we talk about diversity and culture and all those really important things here in San Francisco, they exude them all over the top. And you've heard the facts about all the laundromats nearby. I mean, I had a laundromat close, and I was able to adapt for another one that was about a 5-minute drive from my house in Bernal Heights. So I've gone through that. It's a little bit challenging, but you can get past it. And unlike the Royal Cuckoos, case we heard earlier, the folks who are currently in the space are leaving on their own accord, or at least they're leaving. And so that had nothing to do with Yorkum and Nicole. Their food is amazing. They're quality people. They've done amazing volunteering at our school. He coaches soccer. When I think about the amount of time, energy, and money they've put in to get this restaurant up and running over the last few years, to think they could also volunteer and be good friends and give back to our community, wow, I mean, amazing people. So I've also tried their bread and their food. It is also amazing, so I'd encourage you to try it. I strongly encourage you to support the opening of this restaurant. They're quality people, and I know they will make the local community, residents, and businesses feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Kristen Hansen. I am a resident of Noe Valley. My children attend Rooftop K-8 school, along with Joachim and Nicole's. I'm also married to a Danish man. And when Joachim and Nicole came to our school, we were thrilled, first of all, that our son could speak Danish to another classmate, which was fun for him and for Joachim and Nicole's son. We were also really excited to hear that they were chefs and they were hoping to open a restaurant, which does not exist in San Francisco, a Danish restaurant. In Denmark, there's a phrase called hygge. That means cozy togetherness. And food is all about that in Denmark, and gathering and people coming together. Joachim and Nicole have done an amazing job at the public school we go to by immediately engaging themselves in the community. This is not something that happens in Denmark. People don't engage in the public schools. They're very self-sufficient and run. In this city, parent engagement is crucial. They have volunteered their time. They have cooked meals for fundraisers, for different, people have been now introduced to an amazing cuisine and an amazing culture. And it's so exciting to have them in this city, which is all about diversity, that's what makes San Francisco so amazing. And they are going to offer so much. And I totally understand the laundromat issue. I mean, I have used laundromats in this city, and I know it's tricky. My concern is with the argument is that there's not going to be a laundromat there. Whether or not they have this restaurant in this space, I don't think that a laundromat is going to be in that space. So let something come into the space that's going to engage the community in a really positive way. They've done it. You've heard the previous gentleman before me. They've engaged themselves in community so well. And it's been so important for the families that I know and the community that I am in and what they have done. So thank you for listening, and I strongly hope that you make the decision to let the restaurant go ahead, Canteen.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for letting me share my thoughts on this case. My name is Mohamed Chishia. I am originally from Denmark. I am a resident of Mission, 1 block away from Royal Cuckoo, actually. I've been there for 9 years. I went to college here. I met my fiance here. Maybe one day I'm going to buy a house and have a family here, and I really see this as a place where I want to live for a long time. I have known Joachim and Nicole actually from the time when they were still transitioning from Denmark to United States, and I saw how they came here and came as a curious tourist, but actually fully embraced this as their own city. It's not easy to leave everything behind from your home country and come here and try to do what they want, which is set up a small business. And I have been fortunate to share an office with Joachim for a while, and I didn't understand how hard it is for small business owners to operate and run businesses. I mean, these guys are putting all of their money into one basket, and even when they're doing that, it's so hard to make it work. It's taken them 3 years to find a space that they can afford, that fits into their criteria, and that ultimately will be a viable business that will give joy to all of us. And knowing them, they will also be great managers for a lot of people. And I hope that you will take that into consideration. I hope that San Francisco is still a city where small business owners have an opportunity to build their businesses and thrive, and where we can embrace the positivity of this city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peter Jensen. I've lived in San Francisco for 15 years. I'm also originally from Denmark. You heard earlier about the special Danish hygge, part of our culture, and it is truly unique. I spend a lot of my time advising Danish startups on how they can move over here and build their businesses here. And Christian talked about the Innovation Center down in Palo Alto. I think they've had about 150 startups through there, many of which have moved here, secured financing, building their businesses. And the canteen that Nicole and Joachim want to build would be a fantastic place to gather around and to introduce the entire ecosystem here in the Silicon Valley to the Danish culture. And of course, all of us Danes who are here, and I think also others, would really enjoy, of course, the food, but also the Danish hygge. And finally, I'd like to repeat what others said, and that is Joachim and Nicole are fantastic people. They are entrepreneurs. This is not their first rodeo, and but they do it with pride and with, I would say, dignity, and they're really good people. But the point is, they have a proven track record in building a business, and therefore it's going to be a success. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Elizabeth Miles. I am speaking in support of Canteen. I work here in the city, and I've known Nicole and Joachim for about 3 years. I enthusiastically support the restaurant, not least of which is I've tasted some of Nicole's delicious cooking. It's great. But I want to speak briefly to the issue of community. I think that it is important. The city is undergoing a lot of tectonic changes in its formation, and building small businesses and family-owned businesses and having children in public schools and keeping families in San Francisco is really vital. And Nicole and Joachim have invested, as everyone has explained already, Nicole and Joachim have invested in San Francisco. They're ready to go. They have invested time and money and creativity and blood, sweat, and tears to get this project going. I think it's important to reiterate that their project is not related to whatever caused Little Hollywood and the landlord to part ways. That's not really relevant to why they are here today. I think that the fact that a small family-owned business in this neighborhood is equal, I think it's arguable that that is an equally strong community builder than the previous business. Finally, I just want to reiterate some of the key points from staff's report. The project does comply with planning code and advances the general plan. The change of use would have no negative effect on existing housing stock in the area. And for all of these reasons, and supporting the previous speakers, I hope you will support this new small business, not take the DR, and approve as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Alex Smith, and I am a resident of San Francisco, as well as a sixth-generation San Franciscan on my father's side, something I'm very, very proud to tell you. I met Nicole actually working alongside her in a kitchen in San Francisco. I immediately fell in love with her passion for food, her passion for bringing people together, and just how incredibly generous she was as someone who was just learning to be in the culinary world after switching careers. I jumped on the opportunity when she gave me the opportunity to work alongside her at the farmers markets in the Ferry Building, where we would set up at 6:30 in the morning and start serving these smorgasbord sandwiches when it was raining outside, and introducing San Franciscan residents as to what this idea, the Scandinavian cuisine, even was, and going from having a few customers in the first week to a booming line around the corner by the third month that we were there, where people were enthralled to be able to get this cuisine, the introduction of it. And I just kept telling Nicole, I cannot believe that there are so many incredible Scandinavian people in San Francisco, and how little of the Scandinavian restaurants there are and gathering places for these people. So, and then to add on the introduction of this cuisine to people like myself who are born and raised here, and very much just think of myself as an American, as well as friends of mine. So, you know, the truth of the matter is that unfortunately a laundromat is closing. I, you know, give my regards to that. But what is coming in is so much more than a place to wash and fold your clothes. It is a community place. It's somewhere that is being run by a family, small business. It is increasing the diversity of San Francisco, which is something that I think we can all agree is something that makes San Francisco so beautiful and such a wonderful place to live in. And I can't imagine a more a better choice to put in the building space. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Andrea Aiello, and I'm the Executive Director for the Castro Upper Market Community Benefit District. I'm here today to share the CBD Board's approval for this project, and we did send a letter. Really urge you to support this really creative and innovative small business. We're really excited about the idea of having a restaurant on that block of Market Street. It's kind of a hard block to activate, and we really hope that they'll be able to have tables and chairs outside to further activate the sidewalk. It's that block. I don't know if you all know that block, but it's a challenge. It's right after Safeway, and that's a real challenge. There's nothing there. So by having some tables and chairs outside, having an inviting place will really help that block. We're also really excited because there seems to be a trend in the neighborhood to bring in for specialty restaurants to move in. And this will add to that diversity of international restaurants. And so we're hoping that we can kind of build on that and really create a much more vibrant Market Street. And I just want to remind everybody that this is not about, we're not voting whether the landlord can raise the rent or not. That's already done. And the landlord gave the owner of the laundromat a 2-year notice. Unfortunately, the owner of the rest of the laundromat did not let their employees or customers know that, but they knew 2 years ago that they were moving out. And so the issue before you is whether this small business restaurant can move into a vacant space. And it's really, I guess it's a change of use issue. So thank you very much, and I hope you vote yes.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, my name is Anne Bundgaard. I'm also Danish. I've only been living here for 2 years, but I want to tell a short story from my personal, professional life. Recently, I'm an artist, and recently I did a restaurant, wall murals in a restaurant in Oakland. I didn't know the owners before, but I met them in a local running club, and I decorated this restaurant, and I've been coming back a lot because not only because of the food, but it's mostly because of the atmosphere. They're always coming. I mean, the community is really a thing for me because I did the artwork, but also for the other guests, I can so clearly see how much it means for them that it's. I mean, it's nice people. It's good food. People are just coming back. So, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Matt Flaidlin. I'm a resident of San Francisco. Just came up, took some leave so I could get up from Silicon Valley to stand here in support of this conversion. My biggest concern after hearing the story was that I really felt like this claim was both arbitrary and capricious in legal terms. It's arbitrary because there's lots of conversions of laundromats going on across the city. The individual is not really taking a concerted effort to look at this in the big picture. They're singling out this one restaurant. It's capricious because I don't believe there's a law in the books right now that prevents this conversion, and I think the proper way to go forward with this would be to create a law to protect laundromats, not to single out a single business conversion. The other thing I'll say as a resident of the city is I think a decision to not allow this has a couple of bad consequences. One, it stifles conversion of good space over to more useful businesses. The second is I would think that this could be construed as a taking by the city, essentially telling the landlord that you can't convert your business over. They're essentially forcing them to be a laundromat. My understanding of the facts of the matter is that this was this piece of property was actually up for rent for 8 months. Not a single laundromat owner decided they would even put in an offer for this. I'm afraid it's not a viable business, and I think the city would be putting itself in a really tough position if they didn't allow this conversion. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Charlie Canfield. I've lived looking at the Little Hollywood Laundrette for 22 years, working out of my apartment. And I have nothing against this project. I think it's a noble effort to bring in a community feeling space and a service, but they're taking over a space that was a community space for 51 years, a family-owned business, getting pushed out because there aren't enough protections and preservations for these essential services. There's no shortage of great restaurants in San Francisco. There's certainly an increasing shortage of laundromats. The buildings in that area and elsewhere in San Francisco are small. Most of them don't have laundry. Even the luxury buildings that have risen around there get their laundry done there because they're too busy paying their mortgages. I just hope we learn from the Dutch in their attention to preserving sustainable communities and making sure you can walk places and reduce traffic. I walk. I don't have a car anymore because of this density of the city, and I was able to land in a nice place where there's access to these things. I'm not going to be driving to another laundromat. I guess I'm going to be hiking to another laundromat. I don't know that this list is updated. I think there's more dropping day by day. So I know you guys are a progressive bunch, and I just hope that these small businesses aren't so vulnerable to these predatory conditions. You know, the highest bidder gets the free market, not the little guy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on this item?
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Judith Levinson. I live in the building. I've lived there for 28 years. I am in opposition to this restaurant and feel that a tax restaurant has gone out of business. They were in the Swedish American Hall. They had an opportunity to choose that space, but they choose to take out a legacy business that I've been going to for 28 years. I would love them to have a successful restaurant. I'm in support of them, but not in this building. The building was built in 1927, and we've seen a lot of floods, and the pass-throughs are awful. They've raised our rent for a lot. And I do think that there were other places that they could have chosen, south-facing and all of that. But I do think that this should have been considered a legacy business. Somebody, maybe, I don't know who would have stepped up to have commissioned that, but they definitely should have stayed a legacy business, and you know, perhaps another laundromat could have moved in there. I don't know, considering 8 months, but considering the rent was raised double, that's the reason why they had to move out. It wasn't because of anything else. They would have stayed. And so I thank you, Commissioners. Please vote no on this and consider changing it to be a legacy business so that we could continue to have our laundromat. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Ms. Strauss, you have a 2-minute rebuttal.
really feel like I need to add anything. I think that both sides more or less agree on the issue, except I guess I'll reiterate that there really are only 3 other laundromats in the area. And also this idea that, I mean, I'm disputing that that Little Hollywood left on their own and would have left anyway. I do agree that the issue before you is very literally change of use. And obviously, it's completely within your purview to say, what should this be used as? And up until now, it's been a laundromat. The question is it good for the city? Is it good for the community to end this laundromat use and change it to a restaurant use? I don't think that it's good for the community to change it to a restaurant use because there are other places that could be restaurants. The fact that this seems like a sort of cheap option for the potential restaurant is because the costs of converting it are being spread out and borne by all of the people who can't use it as a laundromat anymore. And that's not really fair to the customers. The landlord had a deal with the owners of the laundromat. The new potential restaurant has a deal with the landlord. But the only way for the customers of the laundromat to have an impact on what happens there is through this process. And no one consulted the customers of the laundromat until now. And those are the people who we really have to consider what the cost of this conversion is going to be to their lives. So please let it be a laundromat. Thank you.
Thank you. Project sponsor, you have a 2-minute rebuttal.
Thank you. As stated earlier, the space is now vacant. The laundromat has closed, and the question now is, who's moving in? If the commission rejects our change of use and does not allow a restaurant like ours to move in, this usage status will not remain as only a laundromat. It will be tagged as general retail. General retail means the space will be available for many kinds of retail, not just laundromats. So let's say a shoe store owner decides to rent the space. He would be able to do so without having to go through a change of use process and without being stopped by a DR. So, honorable commissioners, we know for a fact that there are no potential renters who wanted to continue running a laundromat at the space. And in fact, it's a very misleading claim that the laundromat can be saved when the lease has expired and a new tenant has already been found. So in our view, the choice is whether to allow our change of use to be approved so we can activate the space as quickly as possible, or to reject us and face the distinct possibility of the space turning into just another empty storefront, or if eventually rented out, it turns into a generic, non-community-minded business. We trust that the commissioners will make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So that'll close this portion of the hearing, and we will open it up to commissioner comments and questions. I have Commissioner Richards and Fong on the docket, but they aren't here. Commissioner Richards.
So I'm familiar with the neighborhood. I don't live very far away. I'm very familiar with the issue of vacancies. Actually, it feels like sometimes when I walk down the street in this neighborhood in the Castro, it's 2008, 2009 again, at the bottom of the economic kind of recession we've had. I ran from the men's room, catch my breath. I raised money for the CBD to do an economic retail study, of which I think which probably informed the decision here to bring the restaurant in. I sat on the technical advisory team for the CBD way back when, many years ago. I resigned from that when I actually got seated on this commission, so I'm very familiar with the issue there. Question I have, I guess, for staff is this whole change of use process. I think this is the first one that I've seen in the 3 years I've been on the commission. So we have this process that says, hey, we're going to change the use from a laundromat to a restaurant. We're going to notify the neighborhood. I actually saw the notification, the boxes checked, change of use. Why do we do this? What's the whole purpose of this?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Well, I mean, here we are today with the choice before us to either allow it or not allow it. but what's the intent of the process? I mean,
I would say, and feel free to jump in, Marcel, if you'd like, to notify the neighborhood that, you know, there is something that is potentially going to come in and replace it,
Okay.
to give neighborhood the opportunity to protest it if they would like to.
okay. So, okay, I mean, I'm still struggling with, I mean, so Ms. Strauss has every right in the world to come here and protest it. That's what this whole process is for.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So that's what she's within her right. She's not capricious or arbitrary. That's what we set the process up for. So there we go. Was the business listed for sale? I mean, the question I have here is, you know, we have businesses in the neighborhood where they don't get their lease extended. We have one very notable one, it's probably half as old as this in the neighborhood, where they kept going month to month, and the business finally said, I can't do this anymore, I can't plan or do capital expenditures, I'm done. Or we have businesses where they go from $2 or $3 to maybe $8 or $9. So they're forced out, which is basically the same thing to me. This one here, at $4 a square foot, if that's really the rate, doesn't seem arbitrary. And the fact that a restaurant steps in to take over the space verifies to me that it's not an arbitrarily high amount of money to get this restaurant pushed out. And maybe Ms. Mendelson, if you could finish what you were saying, I really wanted to hear, because we have 10% vacancy rate. Somebody mentioned the fact that we have a restaurant currently sitting turnkey in the Swedish American building.
That wasn't available when they were looking for space, by the way.
Okay, can you
We would
finish?
have looked at it. We didn't look at it. We made an offer on a space on Lower Fillmore, and we're told that the developer wanted to build the building, and so he wouldn't consider us. We made an offer at 2198 Market Street, which is still available.
And which site is that? What spot?
That's on the south-facing side of the street. It's a new build at the corner of Sanchez and Market
the
Street.
DeBose?
Pardon me?
Is it the DeBose?
Yes,
Called the DeBose?
yes.
Okay.
And the landlord had an issue with them not being open at night, and they offered to do special events and community gatherings, and that wasn't enough. They weren't secure in a breakfast lunch concept. We even did a full cooking for them, and they sampled the food. They loved it. They loved everything it stand for, but they weren't comfortable. We made an offer at 69 Golf, and it was unaffordable. The building was structurally ready to fall down. They needed a new sewer that was going to cost $50,000. So we ended up walking away from that. But we looked up and down that street. We looked at every real estate publication. We drove around once a week. We had a standing meeting where we would drive around the neighborhood, make a list of restaurants, call the owners of all the restaurants or spaces that could be converted to a restaurant. We had to search the phone numbers, then we'd call them and see if they wanted to close anytime soon. We contacted landlords, we contacted businesses. We truly, I counted them today, there were well over 100 spots that we looked at. It wasn't an arbitrary decision to take this. We looked long and hard. We contacted the landlord. The space had been on the market for a long time. It was in serious disarray. The bathroom didn't even work. The sewers were backed up. I mean, the space isn't in great space. This space,
Okay.
yes.
And was this business listed for sale?
No, it was not listed for sale. It was listed by a broker for lease, but the tenant had never listed it for sale. The laundromat had never tried to sell the business.
Okay. And to your best of your knowledge, was this ever tried to be secured as a legacy business?
Not that I know of. I
Okay.
really didn't interact. I represented
Sure.
Canteen.
Okay.
I do know the broker that represented the landlord. I know he's out of the country because he wanted to come here and speak
Sure.
today. And I know he sent in a letter about how long he marketed the space
Great.
and the lack of interest. For 8 months, I think he got no offers.
Okay. Great. That really gives us a lot of
Yeah,
background.
if I can
info.
answer any more questions,
Thank you.
let me know.
So what's happening here is happening all over the neighborhood. We have a lease that comes up. A new lease is offered here again at $4 a square foot, knowing this neighborhood doesn't seem like it's arbitrary or out of line. If nobody rents it, the landlord, we've seen this, Mr. Bergerac, the place that's vacant, and it sits and it sits and it sits until the price is actually realized, and we have these kind of structural terminal vacancies that just go on seemingly for years. The fact that somebody stepped up and took this space quickly is a fantastic thing. I just wished it was in another space because I really love to have the laundromat and canteen, both. But that all being said, I don't think we should force the landlord at a reasonable rate to subsidize the market. I mean, $4 a square foot, we shouldn't say to the landlord, you can only charge $2 a square foot to keep the laundromat there. I don't think that's fair, and I think that's probably would be kind of a taking. I think the issue here, and somebody raised this, the woman who lived in the building, there's a larger policy issue here around laundromats and gas stations and what I call essential serving businesses to neighborhood. You know, I see elderly and disabled people with their kind of granny carts now pulling their dirty laundry a lot further than what they're able to, and it's a shame that even somebody says, I lived in Bernal, I got in a car and go. Well, not a lot of people own cars who are elderly or disabled, so you know, they're kind of out of luck unless they try to go for one of those services that costs a lot of money that comes and picks it up, takes it away, and brings it back all nice in a wrap bundle. But that's not what we're talking about here. I do think that we should be looking at these kind of things in the future. I mean, even Hoodline in one of their articles talked about the incredible shrinking laundromat landscape in the city. I think one of the things, this is the testament to all the things that we've been talking about, is even the last case, the commercial and retail landscape's changing so fast that we can't adapt to it quickly enough. And what's happening is we've got people kind of becoming victims of it. So if you can't cart your laundry far away in your granny cart and you needed this business to achieve that, get your clothes clean, you're out of luck. And so that concerns me. I don't think denying the change of use permit to Canteen does any of us any good. It only creates an even worse situation. I love the concept of Canteen. I really do. I want to come and eat there. I love the concept of another laundromat in the neighborhood. But, you know, I do see Ms. Traus's case here. I really do. But I think that we'd be doing more harm than good by denying the change of use permit.
Commissioner Fong.
I agree with Commissioner Richards, and I understand Ms. Strauss's concerns. A couple of thoughts. I think that, you know, it is a coin-operated business, and even if you're moving people through there 24/7, it's still, you know, you can't generate that much revenue through a coin-operated business. You know, we haven't ever seen a laundromat on the second floor, which rent is a lot less. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that may be a possibility. I'm kind of curious about, and of course, your notion, and which I agree with, there are certain essentials for a community, whether they're gas stations, whether they're laundromats, and this is one of them. What is, from the planning department's perspective, what's our requirement on laundry facilities within buildings, either for rent or condo? I mean, we mandate bike share and bike parking, but we don't mandate laundry facility. And has there been ever any discussion for that? X number of units, X number of machines per unit in the building.
Yeah, we currently don't have anything in place that would mandate in-unit laundry.
I mean, that's correct. We don't mandate it. I mean, others might correct me if I'm wrong. I think most of the newer buildings do have facilities, especially those of a certain size. They typically either have facilities in units, or a shared facility, the basement or something. I think my guess is that most of the new buildings do have them, but we don't require them.
I'm just kind of throwing out maybe something for us to consider as we're losing these laundriettes, laundromats, laundry whatever. Whether it's a pull-up service, if the whole world becomes to a drive-up, pickup kind of service, at least a white zone for that, or a huge locker where you can hang and drop off laundered materials. Just give a little consideration, because we're putting so much attention to bike parking, that this is another important essential, I think, for living, and everyone likes us to be clean and hygienic. So I think we all appreciate that.
Commissioner Moore.
I think this is a good discussion, out of which we could at some point develop policy. Just for the record, all new residential buildings with multiple units, particular condominiums, do have laundry facilities, storage facilities, bike facilities, a standard part of amenity. The amenities in other areas are being driven up to TV rooms with kitchen and gathering, et cetera, et cetera. So it is really the older buildings and residents in older buildings which are affected, because unless there is a full basement with room, question, should the basement be an extra EDU, or should it provide a laundry facility? Because in older wood construction, you cannot put a washing machine into every unit, partially because it reverberates to the structure, it is very disruptive to others, and it is also an issue of plumbing and safety, because washing machines tend to clog up and you get like water damage throughout the building. That's why they are in the basement and not on upper floors. That is just simply the mathematics of what is best and safest. They also have ventilation requirements for electric or gas dryers. They're slightly different from a DBI, fire prevention point of view. So there's a whole bunch of code issues, but I think as a policy, just like with gas stations, we need to look at San Francisco as being primarily composed of older neighborhoods, of higher density living quarters, where there could be metrics and policy around how far do gas stations need to be apart, or what is the minimum maximum distance to really serve the city as a whole. That's my big stick on all of this. And that includes laundry facilities in older neighborhoods, particularly on the hillside. I live on Nob Hill, older neighborhoods. People need to schlep their laundry uphill and downhill, which is not easy to do by a long shot. And we need to think about those things. But I don't think we can take that and exercise any judgment using for this particular project. I think this project comes on its own, and I regret that it wasn't a legacy business if it has been around for 50 or 60 years, but that is something initiated by the community when it's there, not when it's gone. So I believe that we have an approvable project, and I will have to support it.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I will be supporting this project today for a lot of reasons. I understand the consternation with feeling like people are losing neighborhood serving services, but the way to do that is not necessarily to force private property owners to have particular uses in their properties. It's to incentivize a mix of uses in a neighborhood. I will say that even if we wanted to sort of have the emotion win the day of we feel like this neighborhood is losing a service and take the DR and disapprove this project, it wouldn't necessarily solve anything. This is not the first neighborhood to have a sort of sea change in what you see on the ground floor. The DR requester, Ms. Strauss, made reference to laundry services being something akin to grocery and to other neighborhood serving uses. And there are other neighborhoods like in the 3rd Street in the Bayview where they've actually seen similar emptying out of neighborhood serving uses. It's a food desert. It's hard to find services. And so just because you can't mandate that those things will be in any particular place. And I think the story of other neighborhoods bears that out. And I think the alternative of having nothing for months or years on end, as you see with 10% of the other storefronts in this area, is not acceptable. And it's not something that we should be using the DR process to propagate. In terms of laundromat sort of facilities and services, I think that this is something where, like many other types of land use in San Francisco, to support neighborhood serving services, we're going to need to get creative as a city. And our planning code is hundreds of pages long. It might need to be amended a little bit more, maybe shorter or longer, no comment on that, to make sure that we have flexibility for the future. We are in an era of change. I mean, we just talked about this with the other case, and I'll just quickly I don't always like talking about big policy with single projects, but because we don't have a lot of opportunity to talk big policy, you got to do it. So I'm just going to make a couple of really,
I'm talking to her, sorry.
What? Okay. So
I whispered to him, policy, we need policy.
It's the loudest whispering I've ever heard in my life. It's okay. Love you. Oh my God, it's great. All right, so just want to make a couple points. This is the perfect opportunity to talk about how we have adaptive reuse of our current spaces to make sure our older neighborhoods have the services that they need over time. Commissioner Fong and Commissioner Moore brought out a couple of ideas. Why aren't lodging facilities above the ground floor or below the ground floor, or in adaptively reused parking facilities that have no cars in them? So, these are things that we need to be thinking about as a city, and not necessarily spending an hour talking about one laundromat, but talking about how do we have flexibility in our built environment so that these uses can come and go, but it doesn't need to impact people when they do. So I'll be supporting this project today.
Commissioner Richards.
Just one last thought. I mean, I think the concept of a 10-minute neighborhood should be expanded to include these essential services as well, not just being able to hop on transit or have a grocery store. I think we need to take a look at that and make sure we encourage these kind of things and allow flexibility, as Commissioner Johnson said. So I move to not take DR and approve the project.
Second. Commissioner Koppel.
I'm also going to be supporting the motion today. Just a rhetorical question. How many Danish restaurants do we have in San Francisco? 0. There's, I think, a Swedish one, but there's no Danish restaurants here in San Francisco, which I think doesn't demonstrate what we as a worldly city can provide. Second of all, I see success for this restaurant due to the neighborhood. It's not down in kind of mid-market where we've seen restaurants come and go quickly sometimes because of their large footprints and them not being able to survive. And then also, this is going to tell us a lot about what are essential services. I go to the Whole Foods on Market and Dolores often for the hot prepared food and lunch and whatnot, and they have entire registers dedicated to Instacart where people aren't even going to the grocery store anymore. So, I mean, are these services going to be essential in the future, which have been historically essential? So just another thing to think about.
Commissioner Richards.
Just lastly, essential but affordable. I think that's the real issue. I mean, anybody that has done Postmates and they order a $30 meal and it costs $45 to get, for somebody who's on limited income, that's hard to fathom. Just so I want you to know that.
Commissioners, if there's nothing further, there's a motion to not take DR and approve the project as proposed. On that motion, Commissioner Fong?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel? Aye. Commissioner Melgar?
Aye.
Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis?
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes unanimously 7-0. Commissioners, it'll place us on item 16 for case number 2015-016467 DRP-02 at 653 28th Street. This is a discretionary review, Commissioners. Please note that on June 8th, 2017, after hearing and closing public comment, Commissioners, you continued this matter with direction by a vote of 6-0. Commissioner Fong, you were absent on that day.
Yes.
And in order to participate, you need to acknowledge that you've reviewed the previous hearing.
I have reviewed, and thanks for reminding me.
Thank you. And so, although the time is up to the chair, we've heard this matter before. We've in the past instilled 3 minutes presentations for the DR requester and the project sponsor with 1 minute public comment.
Let's do that.
Very good.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Elizabeth Gordon-Junk here of Planning Staff. On June 8th, the Planning Commission did continue the discretionary review hearing on this item to today's hearing date. The original proposal entailed the demolition of the existing 2-story single-family dwelling and construction of a 3-story over-basement single-family dwelling. At that time, the demolition application was not the subject of the request for discretionary review. The proposed demolition was exempt from conditional use as the existing building was determined by the zoning administrator to not be affordable or financially accessible per the requirements of Planning Code Section 317. At that hearing, the Commission requested the project sponsor revise the project and return with a context-compliant proposal. A proposal that included reduced massing, reduced decking, a roof line that stayed within the stepping and respected the slope of the street, and a design that held back the upper floor from the front building wall by 15 feet. The project sponsor has revised the scope of the proposal, and the building has been changed from a larger single-family dwelling to a 3-bedroom single-family home with space for a 2-bedroom accessory dwelling unit. In terms of other changes, the project sponsor has reduced the height of the proposed design and has lowered the building 2 feet 3 inches to align with the peak height of the neighboring roof. So the new building height is 29 feet 5 inches, as it was previously at 31 feet 2 inches. The height approximately aligns with the peak roof height as surveyed of the uphill neighboring property at 657 28th Street. The third floor was set back with an increase to 15 feet from the front setback line. The front deck and 30-inch parapet wall extending to the front setback line was eliminated and replaced by a sloping shed roof. The total square footage of the building has been reduced to 3,990 square feet. The original square footage was 4,149 square feet. While there is still decking, the project sponsor has removed approximately 38% of the decking from the floor area. The revised proposal eliminates the deck off the master bedroom on the 3rd floor and leaves no decks on that level. The front deck off the 2nd floor is approximately 26 square feet, and the roof deck has been moved to the middle of the roof. The project sponsor has minimized the basement and provided space in the basement and 1st floor level for ADU space. At the basement level, there would be 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, as well as a laundry and utility room. The bedrooms would face onto a light well open to above. There is a staircase leading from the basement light well to the backyard, and at the 1st floor, the ADU would have direct access to a patio and garden. The ADU would be approximately 1,433 square feet. The upper 2 floors would comprise the main residence, and they would be approximately 2,376 square feet. And the roof deck is proposed for the upper unit. The project sponsor and DR requesters have met twice between hearings without agreement. The DR requesters' comments and other opposition and support letters have been emailed directly to the commissioners, but I have those to pass forward. The DR requester on Gold Mine still believes the roof deck is out of character. The height has not been increased in context with the residential design guidelines, and the mass of the building is too large. They request removal of the roof deck, reduction of the building height, additional reduction of the building height, and reduction of building mass. The adjacent neighbor, the DR requester to the west, still believes that the proposal will cast a shadow on her house. There'll be a total loss of sunlight to the center light well on north side, that the project encroaches into the mid-block open space, and there's too much decking that will disturb the peace and privacy of neighbors. The department recommends that the Planning Commission take discretionary review and approve the project as revised. The staff believes that overall the project is consistent with the intent of the Planning Commission's direction at the previous hearing, and that the project has been revised to be a context-compliant proposal. The project has been modified with a roofline at the front facade that respects the slope of the street, and the project has been set back from the upper floor by 15 feet. Additionally, the project will provide for 2 family-sized dwelling units, and the ADU is configured appropriately and provides for direct access to open space. The staff would recommend that a condition would be added if discretionary review was taken, that after the CFC, the certificate of final completion is complete for this project, that the ADU would be implemented and incorporated into the project within 6 months. Otherwise, the project would come back as a mandatory discretionary review. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. DR requester. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me. I'm opposed to the changes because it has increased horizontal build-out in the backyard from 9 feet to 12 feet, both on top floor and 2nd floor. It has increased horizontal build-out in the front from 2 feet to 5 feet, and it still has the roof deck, as well as, I believe, the second floor deck has increased. My request to you is reduce 2nd and 3rd floor proposed backyard build-out to lessen the loss of sunlight in the adjacent properties and maintain the environmentally friendly mid-block open space pattern, which impacts air quality, habitat for birds, as well as noise reduction. If having a nice view of the city is priority, this may be accomplished by switching 2nd and 3rd floor plan, as Commissioner Moore had recommended. if would like to keep proposed floor plan, this may be accomplished by reducing second and third floor each by only 12 feet, about 180 square feet, and still have a large entertainment kitchen area on second floor and keep 3 master bedrooms on third floor. If backyard build out will not be reduced, we respectfully request to at least reduce the shading of the light well of the adjacent building by keeping the existing 653 light well. I also am asking reduce proposed property height to diminish loss of sunlight in the adjacent properties. This may be accomplished easily by cutting back ceiling height of third, second, and basement floor to 9 feet, which is much more than many houses that right now have, and reduce total building height to 26.5. Should this not be acceptable, we request the new building conform to the stepping roof line and topography planning guidelines and step down from the building above the hill. Furthermore, we propose to remove roof deck and reduce the size or eliminate other 2 decks as they will disturb peace and privacy of the neighbors. Specifically, we suggest to cut back 3 feet deck overhang from the second floor to reduce general backyard build-out and to provide more sunlight to even the ADU that they have built. So reduce second floor proposed street view build-out to the existing setback to preserve sunlight in the adjacent properties. If on the next page, you will see that right now I get sunlight in my house at 6 in the morning on a day in June. And on the right side, you will see that there is a proposed plan. On the proposed plan, based on the study that investor has paid for, I will have sunlight in my house after 11 a.m., 4 hours of loss of sunlight. So this is a study that was paid by the investor, not me. And I have a picture on, and as well as you will see the adjacent light wells. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take public comment now in support of the DR. Oh, sorry, 2 DRs.
All right, I won't take too much of your time. Thank you, commissioners, for your attention in this matter. As I said before in the previous hearing, that I represent myself as well as 4 of my other neighbors behind the proposed project. And I will just reiterate what Hannah said in terms of that. Although there is a very slight change in the building, overall it's not appreciably changed. There's only about 150 square feet in reduction in the overall size of the building. I'm not clear about what this ADU issue is. Based on what the commission said at the last hearing, it was the instruction. My understanding was that they should ignore the ADU issue because it's not clear whether somebody will actually create an ADU in the future. So that should not be part of the consideration. I don't know if that's still the case. I still think that the roof deck should be removed for the reasons that Hannah already said, that this is an invasion of privacy and unnecessary in this region, especially with the cold climate in that area. I think that the building is still too high. It does not follow the stepped roof line. And obviously, as Hannah already said, that the mass of the building is quite a bit moved. Instead of being a little bit high, now it's just a little bit lower, but now it's a lot wider. So it's not really changed appreciably in terms of the overall massing of the building, and I feel that it is not responsive at all to the direction of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take public comment now in support of the DR. Ms. Shudish.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm in support of the DR. I'm going to I only get a minute? Okay, real quick. I have a question for the city attorney. This is a demolition. The ADU is being put in. Everything I've seen about ADUs in RH1 says existing. It's going into a non-existing building that's not existing now. That's a question for the city attorney. I don't understand. I think it needs clarification. I think demolition's wrong. I think the appraisal's wrong. Here's a project in the same block, but on Duncan. They didn't get an appraisal overhead picture, sorry. They're doing an alteration, but they didn't get an appraisal. Or maybe their appraisal was too low. How do we know this appraisal is right? But I do think it's only 50,000 over or close to that, the number, which hasn't been raised in a while. And I think that's a question about what's existing. No ADUs. It says ADU in existing building, RH1. They're demolishing it. There's going to be no more existing building when they build that ADU under the garage, which is also questionable. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Romm.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I would like to voice my concern regarding the turn of events and how the new version has been submitted. For one, the horizontal addition is an increase from what we had before, so it should have been 311. Neighbors should have gotten their notification. Secondly, this is an absolute waste of the commission. This could have gone to the consent calendar if the owner and the project sponsor would have followed the directives of this commission. It was really simple. The height should have stayed at the same maximum, at the same level as the house uphill. And, as the DR requester brought it up, it was just a matter of setting the floor to ceiling height at a reasonable 9 feet. Reasonable. And as you will see in your packet, the 3D rendition clearly shows that this building is much taller than the building up the hill. And the depth. What about, residential design guidelines? We were here about 2-3 months ago talking about how the neighbor up the hill is going to be boxed in. So why are you increasing this? And I'm going to voice the same concern about the ADU because, we read the laws of the land up and down, and we can't figure out how they could have possibly justified this. The total square footage is still off the whack. It doesn't represent what we can see in that part of Noe Valley. And again, it's a matter of affordability. Lastly, nuisance of a roof deck. Please do get rid of it. Coming back to all my 4 points, inappropriate height, excessive mass, unaffordability, because this is not affordable by design, the new term, and a nuisance of a roof deck. So please, take DR and force the project sponsor to comply with your directives. This is a waste of everybody's time. This could have been a consent on the consent calendar if they were cooperative and they were willing to follow your directives. Thanks again.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Belinda, and I moved to San Francisco from El Salvador many years ago after college because it represented not just a unique neighborhoods in San Francisco, but it kept the character. And this building will destroy the character, a wonderful neighborhood. This architecture has survived for many years, over half a century, and it has not taken in consideration the neighbors, which is taking the light and taking the massive structure. Please don't let them destroy this neighborhood. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
All right, good afternoon, Lex Fukumitsu. I lived 2 houses up, 23 years. So this morning I got up and looked out the window because just sort of lamenting the fact that we're going to lose view. So just taking a look of the step-down gardens and trees, which were going to be gone. But then also I looked and what it's going to do to Hannah's, this mega structure is just totally engulfing that whole thing. And I was wondering why there's a home. The last 3 families that moved in are all young couples working in San Francisco, similar to the people who want the restaurant. Are they going to live in Vacaville and commute in? I don't believe they're going to be able to afford a $6 million home. It just doesn't feel right to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment in support of the DR? Seeing none, project sponsor. You have 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize. I thought we had 10.
10, but shorter. Anyways, that's no problem then. So I'll go quickly through what I have to have prepared. My name is John Lum. Good afternoon. So we've done specifically all the things that you've asked us to do to modify our design. You asked us to have less massing, but also you wanted us to consider an ADU seriously and how to incorporate that into the project. We responded to the hillside location by stepping the facade, and you asked us to set the third floor back 15 feet from the front yard setback. And then you also asked for a reduction of decks. And Commissioner Moore, you specifically asked us to nip and tuck it a little bit. So I think that we've successfully done that by what we did is we lowered the building an additional 2 foot 3 inches. And we also matched the front facade and got rid of the second floor deck and installed a sloped roof to kind of align with the DR requester's property up above. We certainly reduced the square footage of the main unit by 1,700 square feet to produce basically a main unit of 2,300 square feet. That's about 3 bedrooms. And then we're also reserving the back portion of the garage and also the basement into an ADU, which would be a 2-bedroom ADU of 1,500 square feet. The total above grade habitable square footage is 3,100 square feet. The addition is the rest of it's in the basement. Under the demo reform, this project would not require a conditional use because it's under 3,000 square feet per unit. So we've stepped the facade. As I said, we've eliminated the floor, the deck in the front. We've also moved the third floor back 15 feet. Lastly, we've removed, we've certainly reduced also the deck sizes. In specific concerns that have been raised by the DR requester, the one up, Hannah F. Tahari, sorry, I always get her name a little bit mixed up here. Her lights we've shown you a sun study, and the effects are very minimal. Even though there are some effects, it's not a complete blockage of her light. The pop-out is basically a 12-foot pop-out on the second and third floor. We've set that back 5 feet on either side of the property lines. We did grow the third floor 2 foot 2 inches further because with the reduction in the front, we were facing bedrooms that were less than 10 feet in width, and we thought that was inadequate for a family. Also, the ceiling heights are actually only 9 feet tall. I don't know, people don't seem to have looked at our drawings. We have aligned exactly with her peak as she had requested. We're surprised by that. These are 2 units of 2,300 square feet and 1,400 square feet. We believe these are moderately sized. Given the scale of these homes, we believe that they will be geared for middle-class families. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take public comment in support of the project. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and close this portion of the hearing and open it up to commissioner comments and questions. No, there's no rebuttal because it's the second time we've heard this. Commissioner Richards.
So, DR requester number 1, you laid out a lot of things that you wanted to see further. Do you have something to hand us?
Yeah.
Get hand up.
Okay. Oh, that's what that is. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner, are you done?
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to ask the city attorney regarding the use of the word ADU. That is typically, through the legislation that we have worked on for a long time, a condition that deals with existing buildings who are being enlarged to create additional units. In this particular case, as correctly stated by the public, we have a demolition, and what we as commissioners had asked, we did not use the word ADU, we asked for an additional dwelling unit because the building itself was too extensive and enlarged building in comparison to what was demolished. And so the word ADU is being used, and could you please explain of how that layers itself up to be correctly addressed here?
Deputy City Attorney, thank you, Commissioner. I believe we actually have a member of the Planning Department who can better address this question than I can, so I'm going to pass the baton.
Sure. Commissioner, actually, Marcelle Boudreau, who's our manager of the Accessory Dwelling Unit Program, is here with us, so she'll go ahead and answer your question.
Great. Thank you, Marcelle Boudreau, department staff. You are correct. In June of this year, there were amendments made to the ADU legislation that provided additional opportunities for single-family homes to add accessory dwelling units to their property. At this time, the legislation does state that one accessory dwelling unit can be added to an existing single-family home, as long as there are no planning code waivers that are required, as are common to the ADU program. So if both units can be added and completely code compliant outside of one additional dwelling unit and no parking required, an ADU can be added. This is Section 207C6 of the Planning Code, and again, that came into effect June 2017. The ADUs in this scenario can be created from any part of the existing dwelling unit. They can be built within any portion of the buildable area of the lot, and expansion is allowed for these new ADUs. That's just a brief overview of where we are with single-family dwellings.
Could you focus a little bit more on the question I'm really asking? We are not asking for an addition of a unit. We're basically building a two-unit building in a single-family residential neighborhood. That's what we're doing here. That's a slightly different thing, because we never asked for we never described the situation as an ADU. We looked at a second unit in an RH1.
Sure, understand. I may need to punt this to the staff planner, who would be a little more familiar with the project or with
I think the issue,
staff.
Commissioner, this is an RH1 district.
Correct.
So you couldn't put two units in the normal way. So the only way to add the second unit is by defining it as an ADU. And that's only possible because of the legislation that passed just 2 months ago.
Except we never had a case like that. All we're trying to do is sort out the technicality of what I would think is a reasonable question by the public. We have never encountered that, so I want to be really clear that we fully understand what we are doing on the legal basis of adding a unit in an RH1 when we're not having an existing building where we're adding something, but we have a full demolition and we're building basically a very large house.
Well, it's a house that will have two units, one of which will be defined legally by the planning code as an ADU.
Okay.
And if you remember, that it was a result of the state legislation that required anywhere in the state, required every municipality to allow for ADUs in single-family houses. That was, if you recall, that's the reason that we had to work to pass that legislation.
Except in some ADU cases, DRs were not allowed because the need for adding a dwelling unit in densify overrides the requirement for neighbors taking issue. That's at least what I remember being critical about it. I want to ask Mr. Lum perhaps to speak to a particular question. I think the project has encountered a number of really significant improvements. And I think it does things which we were concerned about, the tucking in, et cetera. You threw one word back at me. The one thing I am a little bit disappointed about is that the second unit can only be added by further expanding into the backyard. And that particular aspect I have an issue with.
It actually, the first floor is exactly the same as was proposed. It's just this. It's just the third floor that needed to expand the 2 foot 2 inches, basically 12 feet past the facade of the existing building, in order to get the 3 bedrooms to be, or the 2 children's bedrooms that are slated for children's bedrooms to be at least 10 feet wide. Otherwise, we would have been forced to make the bedrooms 8 feet wide, well, because we're missing a couple feet there.
Yeah, one of the things, obviously, when we're looking at plans is that these bedrooms each have their own bathroom.
It's a cultural
correct?
thing. Sorry, it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, but this is, again, unfortunately, as much as I like the cultural thing, we are all coming back, all from different cultures. Everybody who sits here comes from a different culture. But that doesn't mean that we can always support putting 12 pounds in a 6-pound bag. I want to just really blunt about that, because the idea of neighborhood fit, the idea of basically modeling yourself with what is around you is still what this commission really stands for. And I do want to add the comment that while I like the idea of the second dwelling unit having ample space, there is indeed a good-sized two-bedroom unit there. The fact that this unit would be using the backyard and then justifying that the open space has to be on the roof deck, in a neighborhood where there are no roof decks, I have a very difficult time doing that. If there is a garden, then I assume living in a multi-family dwelling unit, multi-family building, you use the backyard together. But you're not sticking the roof deck on top and saying, well, because I gave my backyard to the second unit, I'm going to be making myself a roof deck. There are little tweaks in here which I have a hard time with, as much as I want to support what you have done, because, again, there are improvements, but there are still certain things I have a really hard time with. So there's good give, but there is just not quite the tuning that I believe needs to be done.
Okay.
If I could just follow up with Ms. Boudreau on the ADU here.
Sure.
So when they go apply for this project, they're going to apply they're going to apply with the unit there. Not,
I think it'll be
does it have to be a two-step process where you have kind of space there and then add the ADU?
Sure. I think how the staff has thought about structuring this is the overall project would eventually include a single-family home and an ADU. The first permit would be for kind of the overall single-family dwelling. Because in the new C6 bucket for single-family homes to add an ADU, they can create the ADU basically from anywhere. So the staff planner, Elizabeth Jonkier, added an additional condition that would require the sponsor to, I believe, have the CFC filed. When the CFC is done, they would file the permit for the ADU within 6 months, or complete the ADU permit within 6 months.
So what does it show when you go apply for the initial permit? How is that space shown?
It could be any component of the home, other rooms, other bedrooms.
Okay.
And within the C6 bucket, those can all be converted to an ADU.
Within the what bucket?
Sorry, the planning code, section 20, sorry, I'm maybe a little nerdy, 207C6, which is the planning code section that was created about 2 months ago in June, that allows expanded opportunities for single-family home owners to add an ADU.
Okay.
The ADU can be...
It's only in single-family...
Correct. Only in the very, this one bucket.
Only in single-family home in RH1, or?
Nope. It's not related to zoning district. It's only single-family homes that do not require any of the planning code waivers to add the ADU.
Okay. I mean, I think, I've got a little unease about this project because I think we're trying to do a couple of things. We're trying to add another unit and respond to some of the neighbors' issues that it's not, as contextual as it should be, or there's smaller homes adjacent. But I think we're trying to meet both those challenges, and I actually think the architect has done it well. I've got questions about, I see why you need kind of the open space on the main floor of the second unit. I'm not quite sure you need it on the roof deck, but you responded. I mean, maybe we asked a lot, but you responded to everything. I think adding the ADU is creative, but I think we've got to understand what we're doing. We're kind of we're almost turning RH1 districts into RH2, which is good because we need housing, but we're kind of adding, we're having this ability to add additional units in RH1 districts, almost treating as an RH2, which I think we've tried to add density through ADUs in the city, so it gets at that. But then there's challenges about how that fits in, and I think by putting the bedrooms for the ADU below, you resolve some of that, and these aren't huge units. So I'm generally supportive. Commissioner Moore.
I'd like to ask the city attorney again, and I really like an answer to this. When we supported the ADU legislation, we never really quite envisioned the questions which are currently floating in the room here. This is just an honest yes answer, I assume. I never thought about it in this form. If we are approving this building today, we're really only having a good faith intent of doing the ADU to the extent that we are seeing it on this piece of paper here today, because we're not really approving the ADU. We're not really reviewing the ADU. We're basically allowing a big envelope and saying, oh, in the bottom of that envelope, there's going to be the thing. But you're not really deciding on that at this moment. And I just I agree with you, Commissioner Hillis. There is something about it which is a little bit strange. Could you help us with that, perhaps?
Yes, Commissioner. I do have some concerns about this two-step process that's been set forth unless we have it recorded in a condition of approval or somehow otherwise reflected. So I think maybe planning staff could tell us a little further how they see this happening, because if it's approved as is, I'm not sure exactly how we get to the second step.
Or I guess the question, if they don't take the second step, what happens? So you come in and you list this as storage or the fourth and fifth bedroom, whatever you do to kind of get the first part approved, and nobody goes forward with the second part. How do we enforce that happens?
That was our intention of having a condition that it would be brought back as a mandatory discretionary review.
But a mandatory discretionary review of what? Like if there's no permit, if they get the permit to build the home with no ADU, right, which is their plan, and they don't file a permit, what are we DRing at that point?
Well, it would be a two-step process, and Liz, you can...
If I can maybe jump in, I think our idea on this was that we would make them file the second permit before we sign off on the first permit. So we have sort of the hook number one. We have a second permit number sitting with us. We sign off on the first permit where they build the lower spaces minus the kitchen. That's usually the main component of an ADU. They get the CFC for that project, and then we sign off on the second permit the day after they get their CFC so that they can build the kitchen, finish out that unit. And if they don't complete that within 6 months, this is the condition that we're proposing, then we would basically take them back to the Planning Commission, and we would have an informational hearing here before you guys. It's not perfect, but again, the direction from you guys was to try to figure out a way to add a second unit. This is kind of the only way to do it through this process. So this is as creative as we were able to figure it out.
I appreciate that. Commissioner Richards.
So I hear what Commissioner Hillis and Commissioner Moore are both saying. If they come before us as a mandatory kind of DR, can we hack half the building away? I mean, we did it, I think, one side in the avenues where we was built to the full lot line and we got rid of some of it to put it back. I mean, is that what we're looking at?
Unfortunately, likely no. The challenge with this is that we would have to have the CFC issued for the structure to be completed, because as Marcel mentioned, the ADU must go into an existing building. There's no time lag required anymore. That used to be one of the major challenges. So it can happen the following day, but we do have to have an existing structure built. And so there is no way at that point for you to come back and say, you didn't do it, so take off the top floor. It would have at that point already been finalized.
If I may, Commissioners, there is one other mechanism, and that is if it is part of a condition of approval, then violation of that condition of approval is considered the equivalent of the violation of the planning code, and therefore could trigger a notice violation and the whole enforcement process through Planning Code Section 176. So that would be the other enforcement mechanism.
Commissioner Johnson.
I think this was Commissioner Hillis or Commissioner Richards that said this. With this project, I think we're trying to solve two issues. We're trying to get a building that can make it through commission, and we're also trying to preserve or push forward the option for an ADU or a second unit. I think what we want to focus on is making sure that the building, the envelope of the building is something we can approve, because I want to be very clear. I'm very supportive of an ADU. I do think that the intention of the ADU legislation at the state level and our matching legislation at the local level was to allow for the option of buildings to have secondary units if they wanted them. Whether the building is existing or not, to me, could easily be interpreted as it doesn't really matter, because if you build the building today, tomorrow it's existing, right? And so this was not meant to say only quote unquote old, as you define it, homes can have secondary units. It was to say that single family homes, if they wanted to, could have that option. I think the best thing to do, I'm supportive of the project, which is why I've been sort of mostly listening to the conversation, because I think what we need to focus on is the envelope of the building something we can approve? Does it leave the room for the ADU in the future, whether they do it through some convoluted conditions of approval today, or if they try to do it, months after building is there and people are living in it, and go at it that way. I think we're spending a lot of time on the sort of legislative chicanery and not enough on what do we think of the structure. And I think with the structure, I remember our conversation from the last time we had this hearing. It was rather complex. I think everybody had a different idea of what they wanted to do. I think the architect did a good job changing some things, cutting back some things. For example, on the roof deck, we were not at all clear that we didn't want to see that as an option for providing open space. I alone said as long as it's sort of sized appropriately, I thought it was fine. So I don't think that they didn't do what was asked of them in summary from the commission. So I don't know. I'd like to hear some more thoughts on that, and then go to, do we need to do some of the sort of jujitsu with our conditions of approval for the ADU?
Commissioner Melgar.
Thank you. So I generally agree with the points made by Commissioner Johnson. I think where I disagree is that I do think, related to the comments of Commissioner Moore, I do think there are differences between an ADU and a second unit in terms of design and how sort of the life of the building. And I'm not really sure, we've cooked that yet so much since the new legislation was enacted. So that's separate from the process, which, hearing you state it, while it makes sense, it does make me uncomfortable, because in San Francisco, land values are so high and the profit is so much that, folks will push the envelope. I'm not saying that this particular owner will, but this is really, we're trying this out. It's the first of its kind, and it does make me nervous. So as far as, whether we would approve the envelope of the building today, I'm not comfortable with it. I can't support it. If we were approving a single family home that was at 2,300 square feet, I think it would be a different animal, of course. We are trying to do two things at the same time. The second thing that we're trying to do, I think we're just not quite ready, so I'm not going to support it.
Commissioner Moore.
I would echo that sentiment. The original concern was that the building as proposed was too large, period. To right-size the building just as a volume required that it really needed to follow those guidelines which deal with stepping, which deal with tucking in, which deal with not having a roof deck, which deals with common demising lines, light welds, not interfering with each other's view planes and privacy. And secondly, because the enlargement would be larger than what is the average, we were looking for a second unit, call it second unit, accessory, or I don't care. And I don't think that what we see today has quite met that objective. I personally believe that the second unit, irrespective of the process that we will engage in, is still far too large for what we really should be supporting, because it reflects on an oversized building envelope, period. And that the unit in this particular case has 2 bedrooms is not as important to me as that the other building is more right-sized to fit the overall requirements of proper building massing for expansion in this neighborhood. So the objectives are makes the volume of the building more appropriately sized, reduce the primary unit, and for sure reduce the secondary unit, because you're not going to at least convincingly sell to me that the secondary unit has to be 1,400 plus square feet, because that is not the objective of what we're trying to do here. I think it is ultimately that the primary unit is better sized in order to create a more fitting envelope. And I am not going to buy it because we're just adding a second unit and saying, okay, that's why it needs to be that large. If we don't get a second unit because it doesn't allow to properly mass the building, it doesn't matter to me, because I'm not going to throw the rest of the other neighborhood and adjoining owners under the train.
Commissioner Richards.
So I like what Commissioner Moore said. When I actually opened the packet and looked, I said, wow, this is great. We got a second unit. It's not a sham unit. It's a real unit. It's got 2 bedrooms. They're fairly equitable size-wise. It's not, 4,000 square feet and 700 square feet. So I was excited. Then I went through the plans, and I got to the main level on the main unit. And I kind of went, wow, that's a lot of stuff there. There's a great room and a kitchen and a dining room number 2. And I thought, if there is any room to kind of nip and tuck and take stuff away to get the appropriate massing, it's really on the main unit. And I think Commissioner Moore summed that up very well. I like everything you've done.
Damn it.
Can we right-size the building a little bit more to make it fit with everything that we're trying to achieve? I like the idea of a second unit as an ADU. I think it's what we're trying to do when we approve the legislation from a public policy point of view, getting additional units in. So I like it, even if it's an RH1, it's allowed. I think the neighbor does have a couple of good points here on what she handed in on the main floor of the upper unit, on how we can make some changes in the massing to make it fit better with the neighbors. Now, that's what I feel.
But so I think we need to, my problem is, I think they're responding to things we've asked for, and maybe the things we're asking for aren't consistent with each other. So they've added an ADU. You often say you don't want a sham unit, you want it the same size, so they went underground and added it. It's not massing. I mean, that's where I have more discomfort in this, is kind of the 2 units below ground on an RH1 to make the second unit 1,400 square feet. Now, the main house is it's 2,300 square feet. It's not an enormous house. The bedrooms are fairly small. I mean, from what we see coming here to the Planning Commission, it's not oversized. So, I mean, there's a couple options. You lop off the ground floor, the basement unit, and you make the ADU a studio unit in the back with a 2,300 square foot home, and I think that's reasonable. Or you get rid of the ADU and you make them take some of the living space and put it beneath the garage, and you have a, 2,500 square foot home without an ADU.
That's right.
But I think they're trying to do everything we've asked for. It's expanding the size of the home, but it's getting another unit.
Yep.
I would go for lopping off the basement level, because I think it's odd, and I think it's tough to live down there. I'd make the ADU on the main floor behind the garage, and it's a studio. It's kind of your typical in-law unit. My mother lives in that. And I take off the roof deck. I think the massing is generally okay. I mean, I get it. It's bigger than what's adjacent, but it's not oversized compared to the neighborhood. That'd be my take on it. Commissioner Koppel.
Can you make a motion saying that?
Sure.
Ms. Shudish, we always love to hear from you, so I know you're chomping at the bit back there.
All right, I misspoke, and I thank you for your graciousness. What I intended to precisely say was, I think you need to notice it, re-notice it in a 311, because it's an ADU, because of the existing thing. It's a procedural thing, and I'm partly saying as a courtesy to the project sponsors, so they don't get caught in the.
Well, they may need to notice when they create the ADU on that second phase. I'm not sure, but I don't think.
You don't think they need to notice it with the big part of the project, since they're adding the ADU now and you're kind of approving it?
They're not really adding the ADU.
I don't know.
If I could, ADUs don't require notification.
It's existing. It says existing.
But ADUs in general, Marcel can chime in on this, but ADUs in general don't require notification to the public, just as adding a second unit within an existing building, a non-ADU, just a regular unit.
It's not an existing building, 'cause
But
it's a
I think,
brand-new
but I think
building.
the rules
The
have been
point is-
changed, Ms. Shudish, over the last couple months when this new rule came in that you can do this in an RH1.
Please talk to the microphone.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, when you build it.
So I can't do a motion, but if I could, my motion would be to take TR, eliminate the subterranean level with 2 bedrooms, make the ADU the ground floor. I mean, I think, you can add a bedroom in there if it works, or do it a studio and lop off the roof deck. Oh, Commissioner Richards, sorry.
So we're back to that. We're back to that thing where we're going to have a large house with a studio. This could be marketed as a single-family house, which is where I don't want to go.
But it's RH1.
But but the ADU is actually substantial. I mean, there's a benefit to having an additional family there with 2 bedrooms. I mean, you can have an iceberg, as Ms. Shudish coined these terms, with media rooms and stuff downstairs, but having 2 bedrooms down there is of value, I think, and that's why I want to support what we've got here.
I would just look at those 2 bedrooms, where they are and how they're situated and where light is coming into those bedrooms. I do not think that's going to be, I think we just have a bigger kind of secondary unit in this. I think you have a bigger single-family home with just a bigger secondary unit. I don't think this rises to a second unit. Just because you have the square footage, I think it's odd where the bedrooms are.
So, a question for are there any exposure issues here with these subterranean bedrooms?
No.
No?
Marcel Buger, department staff. So exposure for the planning code, a unit's access to light, is measured per unit, and it's one room within the dwelling unit must meet the exposure requirements. Bedrooms, and someone and the commission may know more details than me on this, but bedrooms do have light and ventilation and egress requirements that are subject to review under the building code.
Right. I think it meets the code. It does. But I think it's an odd, for a large unit like this, to have the only light coming into both bedrooms is down a stairwell. It's odd. I mean, I think we're trying to do too much to this building. Commissioner Moore.
I would be trending to make the unit at the bottom much smaller in order to keep the rest of the building smaller. The building can still be Airbnb and nobody would notice. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and this one can too. This whole building can be flipped. So I am more interested in right-sizing the building and take the comment that Commissioner Hillis made, because that's what we have done typically in adjoining neighborhoods as well, just to keep the building smaller. And I would in rebuttal of what you were saying, but I'd love to hear why you are driving for the 2 bedrooms.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I am getting very confused and frustrated, and I don't like being either one of those things. So normally when we try to look at massing of a building, the reason we do it is because there's an impact that we're trying to mitigate. Getting rid of the roof deck, you can argue makes sense. I don't agree with it, but I can see it. Talking about whether this the subterranean level should be there or not be there, or whether it's odd or not odd, does not seem in keeping with driving that argument towards what is an impact that we are trying to mitigate. It's a subterranean level that wouldn't change anything about the from the street look or feel of the building. And I'm just really unclear as to why we're spending so much time on it. I think if there were some other pieces of the structure we were talking about, I would sort of say, okay, let's entertain continued conversation. But I think the fact that this is could be designed as a potential second unit that meets the building code, or even if it remains single family for some period of time before becoming an ADU, it meets the building code. It doesn't rise to the level of increasing any impacts on anyone. When we look at discretionary reviews, obviously it's kind of open season when it gets to the commission, but I really do try, when I pay attention to these things, to try to look at what the DR requesters have asked for or what their concerns are. And I don't hear anything in their case files or in their discussion today that leads me to believe that that change to that subterranean level addresses anything that they've said. So I support the project as is. We continue to talk about the roof deck unless someone can explain to me why the discussion we're having addresses anything that the DR requesters have brought up.
Commissioner Melgar.
Never mind. I was going to make the point about it being in the basement also. So,
Commissioner Richards.
I think we might be better continuing this and giving them direction to come back. Or you want us to make a decision today? Okay.
Yeah, I think we've done that.
Okay. I can't
I
support
mean, I'll
this
take
as,
it. Yeah.
I can't support this as a single-family house.
No, I didn't say single family
Okay,
house.
I mean, but
I mean,
I'm
one,
hearing-
it's in an RH1. So it's
Not an ADU, that's what I mean.
Right. So you could put an again. What I would support is an ADU. I just think, and I get your point, Commissioner Johnson, about the bottom unit kind of not being anybody's issue. But I think we also have to look at kind of what happens in the future with this home. I mean, just look at the backyard. It's kind of odd that you just have this big staircase going down to a subterranean two-bed, and that's the bedrooms for these units. I just don't think that's a livable unit. I think we're kidding ourselves that it's a livable kind of family-sized, typical 1,400 square foot unit. I think it becomes kind of an oversized rec room for the house. I think the problem we're trying to solve is to have a smaller ADU that may not be used like that. We're not solving it just by putting stuff down in a cave. Commissioner Richards.
I just said thank you.
Oh, sorry. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, I think that's kind of where, again, I disagree, and that's why I kept bringing the conversation back to, okay, so what are we how are we actually trying to help solve either problem one, impacting, mitigating impacts to neighbors, or two, making sure that there's a livable structure on that ground or subterranean level. So my personal opinion on this is that it is a little interesting, and if I were looking and I was like, oh wow, someone's renting this out or I'm going to stay there, I'd be like, that's a design challenge, living subterranean. But I've seen it before. I've seen basement apartments. I grew up in New York City. There are plenty of people who live in caves and they are happy doing it. I will say that to mitigate the challenge that Commissioner Hill has that you think might be there, which I can see that you would say this is not a livable space, so it ends up becoming just an oversized rec room. The reason why I was sort of like not trying to engage in that as much is because I think that making the space smaller makes it even more likely that it's just going to be an oversized rec room, because it just becomes a studio in the ground floor of a big $$ house. It's not that big, but in a studio in a much larger home. And so who are you going to rent that to? Who's going to be a tenant long term? It just becomes Airbnb, or it becomes like the place that you have with a separate doorway for when family comes to visit, which are valid. They're all legal, valid uses. But if the point is, we want to create density and really ensure that ADUs, when possible, are units for different families or people to live together, then you got to make them a livable size and allow people the option to say, this is a space that I can make work. But a studio just becomes an Airbnb or a place for relatives.
I agree, but I think then the answer is put it on the third, let them expand on the third floor. Instead of cutting back all this level on the third floor or the second floor, let them build on the third and second floor and build real units in this RH1. But then I think we have the problem of it's not contextual in the neighborhood, right? You're kind of casting shadows. So we're trying to jam too much, I think, into the building, because that would be the answer to that, is if you really want a legitimate second unit, and again, I think we have to remember, this is RH1, whether we like it or not, it is RH1, is expand the third floor and the fourth floor, what exists now, not kind of put it in the basement, where I just think you have I think you have a slightly better chance of it not being used as a big rec room, but I think it's slight. Commissioner Moore.
I just want to remind the commission that we have done quite a few homes on 25-foot 5 lots where we did put a unit right next to the garage, but we never have put a unit below the garage, which is asked for here. We have never done that. I just want to put that, hang that out here.
Commissioner Richards.
Take a look again.
Again, I think I'd be different if this was RH2 or RH3. I'd want the larger flat size units, but it's not. It's an RH1 single family home. Commissioner Johnson.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we're belaboring this so much. I would just say, I don't think that's true. We haven't done ADUs, but we have done what would be considered subterranean construction from the ground floor. I remember a building we had that was 5 stories tall for a single-family home, but the 2 floors that would be considered subterranean from the street level actually opened up to the back, and the back is a slope or something. So we have done it before. Once again, I agree. If this were RH2 or 3, you'd flatten out the 3rd and the 4th floor. You wouldn't have a roof deck. You'd have another floor. You'd have two flats. I would just say, again, one of the challenges that we've had with ADUs to date, and we will continue to have it in the future, is with RH1, you're dealing with these sort of like weird spaces, right? And so you're trying to get an ADU in there. And I like to always think far future. It's a little bit squirrely today because the building's not there yet. And, if they build it in 6 months, plus 1 day, the building is 1 day old. But in 10 years, it will be 10 years old. And I want to maintain the ability to have, and this is something that we've done a shift. We're saying ADUs are a thing that you can build. So why not design the homes of today, which will be the homes of tomorrow, with adequate space for these units? And I think this is something that meets the building code. It's sized appropriately, given that it's new construction. It's not always the case that you can take an existing home and dig out and do all these additions, so you get these funny spaces. And if we have an opportunity to not create a funny small space, then let's not do it.
Commissioner Fong.
I think this is interesting, and I think we all have piqued our interest because this is the first one we've seen. Couple of thoughts. I think what maybe feels a little bit funny is that it's a brand new building, brand new construction, and you would expect if there's going to be an ADU unit built that it would be a less than substandard and not in the basement. They'd be sort of a double shotgun, sort of flat or at least equal light. So that does seem a little bit funky. But I think that we are going to, or will not see, so many ADUs that are going to be of very strange, funky configurations in basements and old laundry rooms in almost tunnel-like, cave-like situations. And by comparing this, which I think is livable and habitable, is actually fine in my eyes. And we probably, because of the way it's set up, are not going to review a lot of the ADUs. We probably would be surprised, and if for good reason, not involved in some of the details of side alleys and service alleys in old buildings and underneath stairwells and garbage collection areas that all of a sudden become bedrooms and bathrooms and storage facilities. So I'm actually okay with this. Taking away the ADU piece of it, I think that the project sponsor has largely responded to the DR requester's requests. If you note that the DR requester doesn't make issue with the ADU unit, I don't believe, in her list here. So, and I think the architect's been diligent in trying to squeeze all these things in and answer some of the things that the planning department's asked, as well as the project sponsor has asked. So this is bold, but I'm going to make a motion to approve, not take DR, and approve the project.
Second.
Just to clarify, the planning staff did recommend take DR and add the conditions for the second unit.
So real condition.
Take DR and add conditions as recommended by staff.
How about the roof deck?
Leave it.
Going to do.
So that was seconded.
I seconded it.
Yeah.
You want me to call the question? Or
Commissioner Koppel. Sorry, there's people on the rosters.
That was my only request, was the roof deck.
Keep it or?
To get rid of it.
Oh, lose it.
I would support it with the roof deck removed also. I mean, I wouldn't want to reject it and then we're not taking DR and the project's approved. But I just think I've driven around the city and I do think it adds mass to the building. You know, when you do have that roof deck, I agree it's set back nicely. You've got a decent third floor deck. Did you know, do you want to make a comment? Yeah.
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
Shudas was also, I'll give you 2 minutes.
I just wanted to show you just this rendering of the roof deck in relationship to the adjacent, to the neighbors above on Gold Mine. He's 115 feet away from this roof deck. So just to show you, their property is actually 8 feet taller than ours. So this is the effect of the addition. We've rendered it correctly because I know that he had included information that was not accurate. So
That's from Gold Mine.
yes, that's from Gold Mine.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
And there are other roof decks in Noe Valley.
Commissioner Richards.
So we cut a roof deck off in this neighborhood before from a person looking down on it. So there's, we've done it before. Question I have is the backyard, is it exclusive use for the lower unit? It is. So this roof deck is the outdoor space for the upper unit. And it's in the middle of the house and it's 280 square feet. I mean, it adds mass, but it's not enormous. I could support it either way.
Sir.
All right, there's a motion and a second.
Shall I call the question? Very good, then, Commissioners. There's a motion that has been seconded to take DR and approve this project with staff conditions, specifically regarding the ADU unit. On that motion, Commissioner Fong.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Commissioner Koppel.
Aye.
Commissioner Melgar. Commissioner Moore. Commissioner Richards.
Aye.
And Commission President Hillis.
Aye.
So moved, Commissioners. That motion passes 5-2 with Commissioners Melgar and Moore voting against. Commissioners, that'll place us under general public comment, for which I have no speaker cards.
Is there any general public comment? Go ahead, Ms. Ram.
So my comment is with respect to the discussion that you had today about the size of a second unit or an ADU. I just happen to think that the whole spirit of allowing single-family homes to have another unit is not to have another, as an ADU, that's not to have a two-bedroom, three-bedroom addition. The idea is an in-law. I mean, why not calling it what it is, which is an in-law? So, sure, 1,500 square feet, to live in 1,400 square feet is always better than living in 800. But here's a quality of life that we're talking about. When you're talking about the excellence in architecture, when you're talking about what is a livable unit, you need to think in those terms as opposed to the developer that is thinking about how many square feet I'm building to sell. I would much rather live in an 800 square foot home that is having the quality of life of light and space as opposed to saying, oh, I have 1,400 square foot in my disposal. That's something that a calculating speculator would think about, not so much, an architect that has excellence in mind. So there are plenty of homes in this city that are single family and are only 1,500 to 1,600 square feet. We don't need to have a 2,300 square foot single family and a 1,400 ADU to just say, oh yeah, we're providing good enough density, because 1,400 square foot of a cave is not a livable space that offers quality of life. And then I have another comment, because I come often to these cases where they get continued, but your directives don't get recorded, to the point that we could come back and say, okay, we have bullet A, B, and C to follow. Yes, there are minutes, but then not to the specificity, that we could refer back and say, okay, Mr. or Ms. project sponsor, this is what was asked of you. Some level of specificity, is really much needed so that we don't have to keep coming to the hearings, and keep having continuance. You almost continued this case. You almost did today. You did ask the project sponsor, would you like to continue, or would you like us to make a decision? So let's just have a little bit more of a specific directive so that we will be able to follow up with the project sponsor as DR requesters could, members of public, and say, hey, last time we showed up, this is what you were asked to do. Simple as that. Like running a project like Commissioner Richards, you're familiar in the software business, you don't show up with a list of, fuzzy things.
Thank you,
that's
Ms.
it.
Rahm. Your time is up.
Please, Mr. After Mr. Gill.
Henry Kornilowicz. Hi, Commissioners. Good evening. The ADUs is.
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, this is general public comment.
Hi, Commissioner. Good evening. Henry Kornilowicz. We've been working on the ADUs quite a lot right now. We're getting a bit of a pushback from the fire department regarding exiting, and so we're trying to work that out because we do have a shortage of housing, and I think the ADUs are a good thing for the city and to provide housing that, because of what they are more affordable than other units would be. So that's one thing. The other thing to remember, these cannot be turned into condos. You have to file and record a notice of special restriction saying you cannot change a condo. Also, it has to be under rent control, right? So that's the other part about that I think is a good thing for these ADUs. And right now, again, I want to repeat that we are having a bit of a battle, even trying to get some of them legalized with fire department regarding exiting and so forth. I agree. Look, they're not your fancy schmancy places with all the the light and ventilation, all that. But at the end of the day, though, I do think because of what they are, they're more affordable, and we do need housing. Thank you.
I want to let you guys know my entire house is 1,000 square foot, and this unit building that you just approved, just living room, dining room is 1,339. So live with that, and if you honestly believe that this $4 or $5 million house will rent out an ADU and doesn't care about privacy or not wanting anyone in it is. I have something to sell you because obviously you guys can be fooled easily.
And I would reiterate the point. At the previous meeting, it was explicitly stated not to consider it as an ADU, that the only issue, as Commissioner Moore said, and actually President Hillis, you also said, do not consider an ADU in the design. It has to look at the mass of the entire building. If you look at the mass of the entire building, it's just as large as it was before. There's a little nipping and tucking here and there, but the intent is exactly the same as it was before. And he only took off 150 square feet out of a 4,000 square foot building. So there was very little change in terms of, they got everything they wanted. You just basically let them have everything. And I'm very disappointed that the Planning Commission did all of these convolutions in order to allow them to do this thing. I saw how you were struggling with that, but that shouldn't be your job. Your job should be exactly what Commissioner Moore said. It's the mass of the building. The mass of the building is wrong. Who cares if it's an ADU or not? That's not the relevant issue in this particular case. It's out of character for that neighborhood. It's way bigger than any other house on that block. You even let them have a deck where there are no decks in that neighborhood. And it's crazy to allow a deck in that situation. That the back space is enough for both of those units. You've done that many times before. So I'm extremely disappointed. And I also feel that you don't give enough voice to I have to take off from work. These guys are professionals. This is all they do all day long. They can spend hours and hours, do fancy renditions, do all this kind of stuff. I have to do this in my spare time on the weekends. They give you no time at all. They tell you, the two meetings we had, he literally said to me, I don't care what you say, we're just going to do whatever we want. And we had to walk out, they walked out of the meeting. The second meeting took 5 minutes because they just said, this is what we're going to do. So there was no dialogue back and forth. They got exactly everything that they wanted. They got every single thing that they wanted. You see them running out of there smiling. It's not fair to the people that actually live in this city. You've just destroyed this neighborhood. I don't know how you can live with that. It's really, really disappointing. I thought that we had a system where the little guy had a chance, but you have just allowed the big developer, and he is a developer, there's no doubt about it. There's no family that's going to live in that house. He has 3 or 4 other properties that he's working on right now. Some of them are before the Planning Commission right now. And, this is ridiculous. You're just he's going to build a $5 million. You think he's really going to go and put an ADU in there? That's a joke. There's no way that he's going to put an ADU in there. He's just going to build a $5 million house. He's going to sell that $5 million house. You're going to get everything that you didn't want in the city is going to come to fruition. You're going to have a very rich tech person that's going to live there. There's going to be no small family that's going to live there. They're going to have maybe a nanny or something like that. It's exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to be doing here. It's extraordinarily disappointing that you're not even elected, that these officials are doing these things and not even think. Did you even listen to what we were saying about the mass, about the size, about what was really going on here? I didn't hear any discussion of that. It's all about the ADU. Oh, we're great that we have more property.
Thank you, sir. Your
not
time
the right
is up.
thing.
Ms. Shudish.
I think the problem is that it is RH1, and as I recall the conversation at the last hearing, which was fairly wild and woolly, it was very esoteric. It was the idea that we could put a garage, we could put a unit in there at some point to create a structure where a unit could go in at some point. The garage, I know that block. You could park on that street. Yeah, it's a hill, but you could park. I think that was what you said, and I think what the project sponsor did was take it, okay, we'll put an ADU now, blah, 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 and we'll do all the money, and we'll get it through because we're giving an ADU and we're having unit equity. When I don't know what we got, but it's RH1, and I don't think that unit should be there like that in that form if you really want to apply my understanding of the ADU, and I do think it should have been renoticed currently today with the fact it's a second unit, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, thank you. Have a good evening. It's not even 5 o'clock.
No.
You can go home and watch Rachel Maddow.
Any additional public comment, general public comment? Seeing none, we're adjourning the meeting in memory of Bob Hamaguchi.